Hello there and welcome. Find a comfortable spot. Perhaps fluff up your pillows. Adjust your blankets just so. Feel the weight of your body sinking gently into your bed, letting go of the day, the thoughts, the plans. Just allow yourself to be here, now breathing softly in and out. We're going to explore the story of a ship, but more than just steel and rivets. We'll touch upon the whispers of its creation, the quiet hum of the minds that conceived it, the gentle tap of the draftsman's pencil, the hopes and lives woven into its very fabric long before it ever met the sea. This is the story of the Titanic, but told softly, like a lullaby carried on a gentle breeze. So close your eyes, or let them rest softly, and allow the story to unfold, like a well-loved velvet curtain drawing back ever so slowly. Let the world outside fade away. There is only this space and this quiet, and the gentle murmur of history. Breathe in calm, and breathe out tension. Let's begin our peaceful journey. The world at the turn of the 20th century was a place brimming with a quiet sort of energy, a subtle confidence. The clatter of horse-drawn carriages still echoed on cobbled streets, mingling with the occasional rumble of a new motor car. Gas lamps cast pools of warm, golden light onto pavements often slick with rain, reflecting the glow of shop windows displaying the latest fashions and inventions. It was an era poised on the cusp of great change, yet still deeply rooted in traditions and a certain stately pace of life. The air itself seemed thick with possibility, a sense of progress measured not in frantic bursts but in steady, deliberate strides. Across the vast gray expanse of the North Atlantic, a silent yet intense rivalry was unfolding. Not one of swords or cannons, but of elegance, speed, and prestige. Great shipping lines vied for dominance on the lucrative transatlantic route, connecting the old world with the new. Companies like Cunard Line, with its swift liners Lusitania and Mauritania, held the coveted blue riband for the fastest crossing. These ships were marvels of engineering, sleek greyhounds of the sea, cutting through the waves with impressive velocity. Speed was the measure of success, the headline grabber. But in the quiet, wood-paneled offices of the White Star Line, a different vision was taking shape. Presided over by the astute J. Bruce Ismay, the chairman, and influenced by the financial backing of the American magnate J.P. Morgan and his International Mercantile Marine Co., White Star decided on a different path. Instead of chasing speed, they would offer something perhaps even more alluring: unparalleled luxury, unwavering comfort, and a sense of serene stability that would make the Atlantic crossing feel less like a voyage and more like a stay in the finest Grand Hotel. The idea wasn't born in a flash of inspiration, but rather cultivated, nurtured in quiet conversations held over polished mahogany tables, perhaps accompanied by the soft clink of teacups or the low murmur of voices in exclusive London clubs and Belfast shipyards. It was a decision rooted in careful calculation and a deep understanding of the changing desires of the affluent traveler. Speed was exhilarating, yes, but the true luxury was space, serenity, and the feeling of being utterly cocooned from the vast indifferent ocean outside. The goal was not merely to cross the Atlantic, but to glide across it, enveloped in an atmosphere of unparalleled grandeur and tranquility. This grand vision required equally grand vessels. Not just one, but a trio of sister ships, each larger and more luxurious than anything that had come before. They would be known as the Olympic class: RMS Olympic, RMS Titanic, and RMS Britannic, originally gigantic. But the name was perhaps deemed too boastful, too tempting of fate, especially after the Titanic's demise. The very scale of the project was breathtaking, a testament to the era's industrial might and boundless optimism. Imagine the sheer audacity, planning 3 floating palaces simultaneously, each designed to dwarf its rivals in size and splendor. The birthplace of these leviathans would be the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, Northern Ireland. A sprawling industrial complex humming with activity, yet operating with a practiced, almost rhythmic efficiency. Harland and Wolff had a long-standing, exclusive relationship with the White Star Line, a partnership built on trust and shared ambition. The chairman of Harland and Wolff, Lord Peary, was not just a builder but a visionary in his own right, a man deeply involved in the conception of the ships he constructed. He worked closely with J. Bruce Ismay, their discussions shaping the very essence of the Olympic class. Central to the design process was Thomas Andrews, Lord Peary's nephew and the chief naval architect at Harland and Wolff. Andrews was a man known for his quiet diligence, his meticulous attention to detail, and his deep understanding of shipbuilding. He wasn't just an engineer, he was an artist working in steel. He lived and breathed the design of these ships, poring over blueprints late into the night, considering every curve, every bulkhead, every passenger comfort. His office, filled with rolled-up plans and ship models, would have been a sanctuary, a focused creation, the air thick with the scent of paper and possibility. You can almost picture him. Spectacles perched on his nose, pencil in hand, sketching the elegant lines of the promenade deck or calculating the precise placement of a grand staircase, ensuring both structural integrity and aesthetic grace. The design philosophy was clear: stability and comfort above all else. While the Cunarders were built for speed, often resulting in vibrations that could be unsettling for passengers, the Olympic-class ships were designed with immense size and a different hull form to ensure a smoother, more stately passage. They wouldn't race. They would preside over the waves. The sheer size, Titanic would be nearly 900 feet long and displace over 52,000 tons, contributed to this inherent stability. It was envisioned as a floating island of calm in the midst of the often turbulent Atlantic. Think of the drafting. Rooms at Harland and Wolff, vast well-lit spaces filled with rows of drawing boards. Here, hundreds of draftsmen translated the grand vision into intricate, detailed plans. The gentle scratch of pencils on large sheets of paper, the quiet murmur of discussion, the occasional slide of a T-square. This was the soundtrack to the Titanic's conception. Each line drawn represented a future piece of steel, a cabin wall, a porthole, a deck plank. It was a colossal undertaking, requiring thousands upon thousands of drawings, covering everything from the massive hull structure and the powerful engines down to the pattern on the dining room china and the design of the doorknobs. Every detail, no matter how small, was considered, debated, and refined. The aim was perfection, a seamless blend of engineering prowess and luxurious living. The decision to prioritize luxury meant incorporating features previously unseen on ocean liners. Plans included swimming pools, a novelty at the time, Turkish, baths exuding an air of exotic relaxation, squash courts for the energetic, and multiple restaurants offering different ambiances and cuisines, from the opulent à la carte restaurant to the cozy café parisien. Grand staircases, inspired by those in stately homes, were designed to impress, adorned with intricate woodwork, wrought iron, and topped by magnificent glass domes that would flood the space with soft, natural light. Passenger accommodation, even in third class, was designed to be superior to that found on many other ships, reflecting a growing awareness of the importance of the emigrant trade, though the true opulence was reserved for the first-class passengers, who would inhabit suites designed and decorated with the richness of country manors or London townhouses. This focus on the interior, on the passenger experience, was revolutionary. It shifted the perception of an ocean liner from merely a mode of transport to a destination in itself. The journey was to be as memorable, as comfortable, as the arrival. Imagine the discussions about fabric swatches, wood veneers, carpet patterns, lighting fixtures, all contributing to the overall atmosphere of serene elegance. It wasn't just about building a ship. It was about crafting an environment, a floating world of Edwardian comfort and style. The ambition was palpable, not loud or brash, but a deep, steady current running beneath the surface of the meticulous planning and design. The whispers of ambition were solidifying, taking form on paper, soon to be translated into towering ribs of steel rising against the Belfast sky. The dream of the Olympic class, and particularly of the Titanic, was beginning its slow, majestic journey from imagination to reality, a quiet promise of unparalleled grandeur sailing towards the horizon. Here, the whispers of ambition we heard earlier began to take physical form, transforming from elegant lines on paper into tangible structures of almost unimaginable scale. The air wasn't filled with frantic energy, but rather a deep, resonant hum of purposeful activity, the steady beat of industry moving at its own deliberate pace. Imagine the sounds, not harsh or jarring, but muted by distance and the sheer size of the place. The rhythmic clang of hammers on rivets like 1,000 blacksmiths working in slow, steady unison, the low groan of cranes lifting massive steel plates, the hiss of steam from workshops, all blending into a unique industrial symphony, a lullaby of creation. The Harland and Wolff shipyard was more than just workshops and slipways. It was a city within a city. Thousands of men, skilled artisans and hardworking laborers, poured through its gates each dawn, their footsteps echoing softly in the early morning light. They came from the surrounding streets of Belfast, men whose lives were interwoven with the fate of the ships they built. Fathers and sons often worked side by side, generations dedicated to the craft of shipbuilding. There was a quiet pride in their work, a sense of contributing to something immense, something magnificent. To accommodate the unprecedented size of the Olympic-class liners, Harland and Wolff had to undertake a colossal construction project even before the ships themselves could be started. They needed a gantry large enough to tower over these future behemoths, and so the Great Gantry, often called the Errol Gantry after its builder, Sir William Errol & Co., who also constructed London's Tower Bridge and the Forth Bridge in Scotland, began to rise. Imagine this structure, a monumental Meccano set of steel girders, climbing higher and higher against the often gray Belfast sky. It stretched over 840 feet long, stood more than 220 feet high, and spanned the width needed to build two Olympic-class liners side by side. It was equipped with powerful electric cranes that could glide along its length, capable of lifting and positioning enormous sections of the ship's hulls with surprising precision. Seeing it must have been awe-inspiring, a testament to human ingenuity and engineering prowess, a steel cathedral dedicated to the gods of shipbuilding. Beneath this sheltering giant, the keels for Olympic and Titanic were laid down in 1908 and 1909 respectively. The keel, the very backbone of the ship. Imagine thick, heavy plates of steel being carefully lowered into place, forming the foundation upon which everything else would be built. It was the first step in a slow, meticulous process, like laying the first stone of a great castle. Shipwrights, men skilled in shaping wood and steel, would have swarmed around these nascent structures, their movements practiced and efficient. Slowly, steadily, the ribs of the ships began to rise. Great curved frames of steel, bolted and riveted to the keel, reaching upwards like the bones of colossal prehistoric creatures. Picture the scene from a distance, the skeletal outlines gradually taking shape, growing day by day, week by week. The scale was immense. Standing at T1, the base looking up, the curved steel would have seemed to soar into the heavens, dwarfing the men working upon them. Scaffolding, intricate webs of wood and rope, clung to the rising structures, allowing workers access to every part of the growing hull. The air would ring with the sound of riveting. This was a crucial, labor-intensive process. Teams of 4 men worked together in a rhythmic dance. One man, the heater boy, would heat the rivets, thick metal pins in a small portable forge until they glowed cherry red. Using tongs, he would toss the incandescent rivet up to the catcher, who skillfully caught it in a metal bucket. The catcher would then place the hot rivet into a pre-drilled hole connecting 2 steel plates. On the other side, the holder-up would press a heavy dolly, a large hammer, against the rivet's head, while the basher swung a pneumatic riveting hammer, its rapid-fire blows shaping the tail end of the rivet, clamping the plates together with incredible force. Thud, 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 thud. The sound echoed constantly, a percussive heartbeat driving the construction forward. Millions of rivets and over 3 million in Titanic alone, each one heated, caught, placed, and hammered home, stitching the giant together, piece by painstaking piece. It sounds intense, but imagine it softened by the vastness of the space, a persistent rhythmic tapping rather than a sharp assault. As the hull grew, it became a hive of activity. Platers shaped and fitted the massive steel sheets that formed the ship's skin. Each plate, weighing several tons, had to be precisely positioned and riveted into place, creating the smooth, strong shell designed to cleave through the ocean waves. Caulkers followed, sealing the seams between the plates with specialized tools and materials to ensure the hull was watertight, a vital, meticulous task performed with quiet concentration. Inside the growing structure, carpenters, electricians, plumbers, and engineers began their work, laying the groundwork for the intricate systems and luxurious interiors that would later define the ship. Miles of electrical wiring, intricate networks of pipes for water and steam, ventilation shafts, all carefully integrated into the steel skeleton. The sheer amount of material involved was staggering. Tens of thousands of tons of steel, sourced from foundries across Britain, transported to Belfast, shaped, drilled, and hoisted into place. Acres of timber for decking and interior fittings, countless fittings in brass and iron. It was a logistical ballet on a grand scale, orchestrated by the experienced managers and foremen of Harland and Wolff. Imagine the visual progression, from the flat keel plates to the rising ribs, then the gradual cladding with steel skin, the structure slowly filling out, taking on the recognizable shape of a colossal ship. It wouldn't have looked sleek or elegant at this stage, more like a brute giant, utilitarian, powerful, its surfaces coated in red lead paint to protect against rust, giving it a raw, earthy appearance against the gray backdrop of the shipyard in the sky. The focus was purely on structure, strength, integrity. The beauty would come later. Consider the men working high up on the scaffolding, moving with practiced ease despite the dizzying heights. They worked through Belfast's often damp and chilly weather, rain, wind, sometimes even snow. Their days governed by the shrill blast of the shipyard whistle signaling the start and end of shifts. It was hard, often dangerous work, yet there was a camaraderie, a shared purpose. Lunch breaks might be taken huddled near a brazier for warmth, sharing simple food and quiet conversation, looking up at the immense vessel taking shape above them. Their vessel. Lord Peary and Thomas Andrews were constant presences in the yard. Not remote figures, but hands-on leaders. Andrews, in particular, was known for his encyclopedic knowledge of every detail. He would walk the decks of the partially built ships daily, climbing ladders, inspecting work, consulting blueprints he seemed to carry in his head, making notes in his ever-present notebook. He knew the ships intimately, not just as designs, but as living, growing entities. His quiet authority and deep expertise were respected by the workers. He wasn't just the designer, he was the guardian of the vision, ensuring every rivet, every plate, every joint met his exacting standards. The scale wasn't just external. Inside the hull, vast spaces were taking shape. The cavernous voids that would become boiler rooms, engine rooms, cargo holds, enormous compartments divided by watertight bulkheads, a key safety feature designed by Andrews himself, intended to keep the ship afloat, even if several compartments were breached. These bulkheads, walls of steel rising from the double-bottomed, floor up through multiple decks, gave a sense of the internal architecture, the cellular structure designed for strength and safety. As Titanic and her sister Olympic grew side by side under the great Errol gantry, they dominated the Belfast skyline. They were visible from miles around, symbols of industrial might and local pride. The people of Belfast watched their progress, these Belfast giants, with a mixture of awe and proprietary affection. They were more than just ships. They were the product of their city's skill and labor, the largest moving objects ever created by man up to that point. Slowly, steadily preparing to meet the water, preparing for their grand debut on the world stage. But for now, they rested, growing, under the watchful eyes of their builders and the quiet hum of the shipyard, giants dreaming of the sea. Let the image of the vast, raw shipyard fade gently now, like mist receding from a shoreline. Allow your focus to drift inwards, past the imposing steel hull, beyond the intricate structure we explored, into the very heart of the ship that was taking shape. For while the exterior of the Titanic was a marvel of engineering and scale, its soul, its true character, was being meticulously crafted within. It was here, in the quiet fitting-out basin after her launch, that the raw giant began its transformation into a floating palace, an interior world designed not just for travel, but for serene indulgence. The launch itself, in May 1911, was a spectacle, but a relatively quiet one compared to the fanfare of a maiden voyage. Imagine the immense hull, now largely complete externally, sliding gracefully down the slipway into the waters of the River Lagan. Not with a violent crash, but a controlled, majestic entry, the culmination of years of heavy construction. But this was just the beginning of the next phase. Now afloat, the vast empty shell was towed to the fitting-out quay. Here, under cover and protected from the elements, an army of new artisans arrived. Carpenters, joiners, plasterers, painters, upholsterers, electricians, plumbers, specialists whose task was to breathe life, warmth, and unparalleled luxury into the cavernous steel spaces. Think of this stage as dressing the giant. The focus shifted from brute strength to refined elegance. Thomas Andrews, ever present, oversaw this intricate process with the same quiet diligence he applied to the structural design. He wasn't just concerned with aesthetics. He understood that true luxury lay in comfort, convenience, and the seamless integration of beauty and function. He walked these emerging spaces daily, ensuring the quality of the woodwork, the smoothness of the plaster, the richness of the fabrics, always with his notebook in hand, making small adjustments, demanding perfection. The centerpiece, the very heart of the ship's opulent interior, was undoubtedly the forward grand staircase. Descending through 7 decks from the boat deck down to E deck, it was more than just a way to move between levels. It was a statement, a breathtaking piece of architectural artistry designed to inspire awe and convey serene grandeur. Imagine stepping into the entrance hall on a deck, the sheer spaciousness, the light flooding down from the magnificent wrought iron and glass dome high above. This dome, an elliptical masterpiece, filtered the daylight, casting soft, shifting patterns on the polished oak surroundings. At night, it would be illuminated from behind by a massive ornate crystal chandelier, casting a warm, inviting glow. The staircase itself was crafted from solid English oak, its wide, shallow steps inviting a slow, graceful descent. The balustrades were not heavy or imposing, but works of delicate artistry, intricate wrought iron in the Louis XIV style, featuring flowing scrolls and floral motifs, interspersed with gilded bronze accents that caught the light. Each panel was a testament to the skill of the craftsman, and at the central landing between A and B decks stood perhaps its most famous feature, a large, exquisitely carved oak panel containing a clock, flanked by allegorical figures representing honor and glory crowning time. Picture the deep relief of the carving, the smooth, rich texture of the aged oak, the quiet dignity of the scene. It wasn't ostentatious, it was deeply, confidently luxurious, a space designed for quiet admiration. Adjacent to the grand staircase landings on the upper decks were the principal public rooms, each designed with a distinct character yet flowing together harmoniously. The first-class lounge on a deck was a vast, tranquil space inspired by the Palace of Versailles. Imagine walls paneled in exquisitely carved English oak, stained and polished to a soft sheen. Deep, comfortable armchairs and sofas upholstered in rich green velvet or silk damask would be arranged in intimate groupings, perfect for quiet conversation or reading. Tall, arched windows overlooked the promenade deck, draped in heavy silk curtains. Elaborate plasterwork adorned the high ceiling, and strategically placed alcoves held bookcases filled with leather-bound volumes. A large fireplace, purely decorative as the ship was centrally heated, provided a focal point enhancing the room's club-like residential feel. The air would be still, hushed, Perhaps the gentle rustle of a newspaper, the only sound. Forward. Of the lounge was the reading and writing room, a more intimate space reserved primarily for ladies. Decorated in a lighter Georgian style with white painted paneling, delicate furniture upholstered in floral chintz, and large bay windows offering panoramic sea views, it was designed as a peaceful retreat. Imagine ladies seated at elegant writing desks, penning letters on thick, creamy stationery embossed with the White Star Line flag. The only sound, the gentle scratch of nib on paper and the distant murmur of the sea. Moving aft on a deck, one would discover the veranda cafe and palm court, adjoining the smoking room. These spaces offered a transition towards more relaxed enjoyment. The veranda cafe, with its trellis-covered walls, climbing ivy, likely artificial but convincing, and wicker furniture, evoked the feeling of a summer garden. Large windows offered sheltered views over the stern. It was a place to enjoy a quiet cup of tea or coffee, regardless of the weather outside. The adjacent first-class smoking room, traditionally a male preserve, was a contrast in style. Inspired by a Georgian country house, it featured heavy, dark mahogany paneling inlaid with mother-of-pearl. Comfortable leather armchairs were clustered around small tables. The air would carry the faint, pleasant aroma of fine cigars and pipe tobacco. Stained glass windows depicted scenes related to maritime history and world ports, casting colorful patterns when the light hit them just right. It was a space designed for quiet contemplation or convivial, low-toned discussion among gentlemen. Descending the grand staircase to B-deck, passengers entered the realm of the ship's most exclusive dining experience, the à la carte restaurant, and the adjacent Café Parisien. Run independently by a famed Italian restaurateur, Luigi Gatti, the restaurant offered haute cuisine in an atmosphere of intimate luxury. Decorated in the Louis XVI style, with delicate walnut paneling, gilded, accents and plush rose-colored carpets and chairs, it felt like a top London or Paris establishment. Small tables dressed in crisp white linen and sparkling crystal offered privacy and exclusivity. The Café Parisien, a novel feature, was designed to resemble a sidewalk cafe in Paris, complete with trellis work, potted plants, and wicker chairs. Large picture windows gave diners the feeling of being outdoors while remaining sheltered. Imagine enjoying a late supper here. The soft glow of table lamps, the quiet clink of silverware, the murmur of conversation. Watching the dark ocean slide past the windows. The main first-class dining saloon, located further down on D-deck, was a room of staggering proportions, spanning the full width of the ship. Capable of seating over 550 passengers at once, it was the largest room afloat. Yet, clever design prevented it from feeling overwhelming. Decorated in the Jacobean style, with white painted paneling and ceilings supported by substantial pillars, the vast space was broken up by alcoves and partitions. Large leaded glass windows, recessed and softly lit from behind at night, gave the impression of a grand hall in an English stately home. Thousands of chairs upholstered in deep green or brown leather were arranged around tables of various sizes. Despite its scale, the acoustics were likely designed to keep noise levels subdued, allowing for comfortable conversation. Imagine the gentle hum of hundreds of diners, the soft clatter of cutlery on china, the discreet movements of the white-gloved stewards. Luxury extended to the private accommodations. First-class cabins and suites were located primarily on the upper decks, A, B, C. Many were decorated in different period styles: Empire, Adams, Italian Renaissance, Louis XIV, 15th, 16th, Georgian, Regency, Queen Anne, Modern Dutch, offering wealthy passengers a choice of ambiance. These were not mere cabins, but well-appointed rooms with brass or wooden bedsteads, plush carpets, silk wall hangings, private bathrooms, a significant luxury, wardrobes, writing desks, and comfortable seating areas. The most lavish were the parlor suites on B and C decks, featuring multiple rooms, private promenade decks, and dedicated stewards. Imagine sinking into a velvet armchair in your private sitting room, the gentle thrum of the engines barely perceptible, the only sound the sigh of the waves outside your window. Second class was by no means Spartan. It was comparable to first class on many other liners. Cabins were comfortable, fitted with mahogany furniture, linoleum floors, and shared bathroom facilities. Second-class passengers had their own elegant dining saloon, also Jacobean-inspired but simpler, a library, a smoking room paneled in oak, and access to promenade decks. It offered a level of comfort and style far exceeding the norm for intermediate class travel at the time. Even third class or steerage on Titanic represented a significant improvement over typical conditions for emigrants. While accommodations were simpler, consisting mainly of multi-berth cabins rather than open dormitories, they were clean and respectable. Third-class passengers had their own dining saloon serving hearty meals, a general room for socializing, and designated open deck space. White Star Line recognized the importance of the emigrant trade and aimed to provide a level of dignity and comfort previously unknown in steerage. Beyond the living spaces, Titanic offered amenities designed for health and recreation, contributing to the feeling of a self-contained resort. Deep within the ship on F deck was the heated swimming bath or pool, filled with warmed seawater, a novelty that generated much interest. Adjacent were the Turkish baths, a complex designed for relaxation and rejuvenation. Imagine stepping into this exotic space. Intricate Moorish-style tilework covering the walls and floors, carved wooden screens, soft lighting filtering through stained glass, comfortable couches for repose in the cooling room after experiencing the steam rooms, and shampooing slabs. It was an oasis of calm, far removed from the bracing Atlantic air. For the more energetic, there was a squash rackets court on G deck and a gymnasium on the boat deck, equipped with the latest fitness apparatus of the day: electric horses, rowing machines, cycling machines, all available for passengers to use under the supervision of an instructor. Every detail, from the patterns on the china and the weave of the carpets to the design of the light fixtures and the quality of the linen, was carefully considered to contribute to an atmosphere of serene, understated luxury. It wasn't about flashy gold plating everywhere. It was about quality materials, impeccable craftsmanship, and thoughtful design, creating a harmonious, comfortable, and deeply impressive interior world. This was the environment Thomas Andrews and the White Star Line envisioned: a floating sanctuary of Edwardian elegance and tranquility, ready to glide across the ocean. A world within a world, peaceful, secure, complete. Let the images of polished oak and velvet upholstery soften now, fade gently like watercolor drying on paper. Our focus shifts from the grand spaces to the quiet presence of the people who brought this magnificent vessel to life, and those who were preparing to make her run. The human element, the countless lives interwoven with the story of the Titanic, long before her name became legend. We return briefly to the vast shipyard of Harland and Wolff in Belfast, but this time, let's look closer, past the towering steel structures, and see the faces, the hands, the spirit of the thousands of workers who poured their skill and energy into her creation. They weren't just cogs in a machine. They were individuals, artisans, tradesmen, laborers, each playing a vital role in the intricate ballet of construction. Imagine the sheer diversity of skills required. There were the shipwrights, masters of shaping wood and steel, laying the keel, framing the hull, men who understood the very bones of a ship, platers wrestling with massive steel sheets, heating, bending, and riveting them into place to form the vessel's strong skin. Riveters, working in rhythmic teams, their hammering a constant pulse in the yard, a sound that, while loud up close, blended into the overall hum of industry when heard from afar. Like the persistent tapping of a woodpecker in a vast forest, caulkers meticulously sealing every seam to ensure the giant was watertight, a task requiring patience and precision. Then came the engineers, installing the colossal engines, the boilers, the intricate network of pipes and machinery deep within the hull. Men who understood the power that would drive the ship across the ocean. Electricians, weaving miles upon miles of wiring throughout the structure, bringing light and power to every corner. Plumbers fitting the complex systems for fresh water, sanitation and steam heating. Joiners and carpenters, transforming the stark steel interiors into elegant spaces, crafting intricate woodwork, paneling, and furniture with skills passed down through generations. Plasterers creating smooth walls and ornate ceilings. Painters and gilders adding the final touches of color and refinement. Upholsterers working with rich fabrics to create comfortable seating and luxurious draperies. These weren't anonymous workers. They were men like Samuel Joseph Scott, a 15-year-old catchboy in a riveting team, who tragically fell from the gantry during construction, a stark reminder of the dangers inherent in building such giants, even amidst the prevailing sense of progress and pride. There were countless others whose names are lost to history, but whose hands shaped the vessel. They came from the tight-knit communities surrounding the shipyard, like Ballymacarrat, where the rhythm of life was often dictated by the shipyard whistle. Families waited for their return each evening, the smell of coal dust and metal perhaps clinging faintly to their clothes, a familiar scent in homes where shipbuilding was more than just a job. It was a way of life. Their lives were often hard, the work demanding, the hours long. Yet there was an undeniable pride in building the largest ships in the world. A sense of contributing to something extraordinary, something that felt permanent and grand. Picture the end of a shift, thousands of men pouring out of the shipyard gates, a sea of flat caps and work-worn clothes, heading home to modest terraced houses, perhaps stopping for a pint at a local pub. Their conversation filled with shipyard talk, the progress on number 401, Titanic's yard number, the challenges, the small triumphs of the day. Their lives were inextricably linked to the rhythms of the shipyard, the clang of metal, the smell of oil and smoke, the towering presence of the ships on the skyline. Now, let the scene shift gently, across the water, perhaps to the bustling port of Southampton or Liverpool, the home port of the White Star Line. As Titanic neared completion and prepared for her sea trials and maiden voyage, another army of people began to assemble. Her crew. Nearly 900 souls would eventually sign on to serve aboard the great liner, a diverse community responsible for operating the ship and catering to the needs of her passengers. At the very top, of course, was the captain, Edward John Smith, a venerable figure with decades of experience at sea, much of it with the White Star Line. He was known as the millionaire's captain due to his popularity with wealthy passengers, and commanding the Titanic was intended as the crowning achievement before his retirement. He projected an air of calm authority and quiet confidence, his weathered face framed by a neat white beard, his eyes holding the steady gaze of someone long accustomed to the vastness of the ocean. Supporting him was a team of experienced officers. Chief Officer Henry Wilde, First Officer William Murdoch, Second Officer Charles Lightoller, and others. Men responsible for the navigation and safe operation of the ship. Imagine them on the bridge, perhaps during a quiet night watch before the voyage began, their faces dimly lit by the soft glow of the binnacle compass, their voices low and steady as they discussed preparations, embodying the quiet professionalism of the British Merchant Navy. Below decks, in the heart of the ship, worked the engineering crew, led by Chief Engineer Joseph Bell. This was a world away from the passenger decks, a realm of immense heat, noise, and powerful machinery, yet run with a surprising degree of order and quiet focus. Hundreds of engineers, boilermakers, firemen, stokers, trimmers, and greasers toiled in shifts around the clock to keep the 29 massive boilers fed with coal and the colossal reciprocating engines and the innovative low-pressure turbine turning smoothly. The firemen, working in the intense heat of the stokeholds, rhythmically shoveled tons of coal into the roaring furnaces, a physically demanding job requiring strength and endurance, their movements practiced and economical. Trimmers worked in the cavernous coal bunkers, ensuring a steady supply reached the stokers, their lamps casting shifting shadows in the dusty darkness. Engineers monitored gauges whose needles barely flickered, their trained ears listening intently to the deep rhythmic hum and sigh of the engines, discerning subtle shifts in sound that spoke volumes about the machinery's health. It was a world of controlled power, of quiet vigilance deep below the waterline, ensuring the giant's heart kept beating steadily and smoothly. A constant, reassuring pulse felt throughout the vessel. often unnoticed by those enjoying the tranquility above. It was relentless, often unseen work, vital to the ship's progress across the vast ocean. Then there was the victualling or hotel staff, the largest department responsible for passenger comfort in all its forms. Led by Chief Purser Hugh McElroy, this group included hundreds of stewards and stewardesses, cooks, bakers, butchers, waiters, lift attendants, bellboys, clerks, and more. Their domain was the passenger areas, the cabins, dining saloons, lounges, galleys. Stewards and stewardesses attended to the passengers' every need, serving meals, cleaning cabins, carrying luggage, answering questions, always with quiet efficiency and discretion. Imagine a stewardess in her crisp white apron and black dress, moving silently down a long, softly lit corridor, perhaps carrying a breakfast tray adorned with a single fresh flower, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. Or picture a steward in the quiet hours before dawn, meticulously polishing brass fittings until they gleamed like muted gold under the low lights, ensuring every detail reflected the ship's serene perfection. Their work required long hours and constant attention to detail, a quiet dedication to maintaining the illusion of effortless luxury for the passengers above. Even in their own quarters, tucked away from the passenger areas, there would have been a sense of order. Perhaps shared meals in a communal mess hall where conversations were kept low, sharing news from home or quiet observations about the voyage ahead. In the galleys, an army of cooks and kitchen hands worked under the direction of the chef de cuisine, preparing thousands of meals a day, from simple breakfasts for the crew to elaborate multi-course dinners for first class, required incredible organization and skill. Imagine the controlled bustle of the main galley, gleaming copper pots hanging. Overhead, chefs in tall white hats calmly overseeing preparations, the gentle aroma of baking bread mingling with roasting meats. A hive of culinary activity operating with practiced precision, even amidst the gentle motion of the ship. There were also specialized crew members, each contributing their unique skills. The ship's surgeons, Dr. William O'Loughlin and Dr. John Simpson, responsible for the health of passengers and crew, maintaining a small but well-equipped hospital. The postal clerks managing the sea post office, sorting thousands of letters and parcels during the voyage, ensuring communication flowed between the ship and the world left behind. The Marconi wireless operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, employed not by White Star but by the Marconi Company, responsible for sending and receiving passenger telegrams and vital navigational messages via the new technology of radio, tapping out Morse code messages into the ether from their small isolated cabin. The faint spark gap sound a connection to distant shores. And of course, there were the 8 musicians, led by Wallace Hartley. Not technically crew members, but booked as second-class passengers, their role was to provide gentle background music in the lounges and dining areas, adding to the ship's sophisticated ambiance. Imagine their string ensemble playing softly in a corner of the first-class reception room. A calming melody, perhaps a gentle waltz or a popular air, drifting through the elegant space, a soothing soundtrack to the unfolding voyage. This entire community, officers, engineers, stokers, stewards, cooks, operators, musicians, functioned like a well-oiled machine, each person playing their part in the smooth operation of this floating city. Many were seasoned professionals having served on Titanic's sister ship, Olympic, bringing valuable experience. Others were young, embarking on their first voyage on such a grand vessel, full of anticipation. They came from Southampton, Liverpool, London, Belfast, and beyond, each with their own hopes, dreams, and responsibilities. They were the human engine that made the Titanic run, the quiet, dedicated presence ensuring the comfort and safety of all aboard, the unseen hands and watchful eyes behind the grandeur. So as you drift deeper into relaxation, think of these individuals, the builders who shaped her, the crew who prepared to sail her. Their stories are woven into the fabric of the ship, quiet threads in a grand tapestry. Feel the gentle rhythm of their work, the steady pulse of the human element that gave the steel giant its life, its purpose, its soul. Let the images of the crew finding their places, the engineers tending their machines, the stewards polishing the brass, fade gently now. like ripples smoothing out on a calm pond. Our journey takes us away from the quiet dedication within the ship and brings us to the bustling, yet somehow hushed anticipation surrounding her imminent departure. We arrive softly at the port of Southampton, on the southern coast of England, the designated starting point for Titanic's maiden voyage across the vast Atlantic. Southampton in early April, 1912. Picture a busy port city, accustomed to the ebb and flow of great liners. Horse-drawn drays still clatter over cobblestones, mingling with the rumble of motor lorries and the cries of dock workers. The air carries the faint, salty tang of the sea, mixed perhaps with the smell of coal, smoke and damp ropes. But as Titanic, fresh from her sea trials near Belfast, steamed majestically into Southampton water and docked at berth 44 of the newly built White Star Dock, later known as the Ocean Dock, a special kind of quiet excitement settled over the waterfront. This wasn't just another ship. This was the largest, most luxurious vessel the world had ever seen, preparing for her very first journey with passengers. Even the seasoned dock workers used to maritime giants might have paused for a moment, gazing up at her towering black hull and pristine white superstructure. The sheer scale of her arrival would have been breathtaking. Imagine her gliding slowly towards the quay, dwarfing the surrounding tugboats and buildings. Her 4 immense funnels, painted in the distinctive buff color of the White Star Line with black tops, rose proudly against the sky, symbols of power and stability. Her sleek black hull, punctuated by rows upon rows of portholes, gleamed softly in the spring light. Lines were thrown ashore, thick hawsers securing the giant to the dockside, her engines finally falling silent after the journey from Belfast, replaced by the gentler sounds of the port. A period of intense yet carefully orchestrated activity was about to begin, but carried out with a practiced calm, honed over years of managing great ships. This was the crucial period of storing ship. In the days leading up to her scheduled departure on April 10th, Titanic had to be transformed from a newly built vessel into a fully functioning, self-sufficient floating hotel in town, ready to sustain over 2,000 people for a week-long voyage. This involved loading an almost unimaginable quantity of supplies, provisions, and coal, all managed with quiet efficiency, like ants diligently provisioning a vast, peaceful nest. Let's think about the coal first. Fueling this giant was a monumental task in itself. Although she had taken on some coal in Belfast, the majority was loaded in Southampton. A coal strike had recently ended, making supplies scarce and expensive, and some ships had their voyages canceled. Titanic, however, as the flagship of the line's ambition, was prioritized. Coal was brought alongside in barges, and armies of coal trimmers worked tirelessly, transferring the black diamonds into Titanic's cavernous bunkers. Imagine the scene, perhaps viewed from a distance. The dark barges nestled against the towering black hull, streams of coal dust rising softly into the air like dark smoke as it cascaded down chutes into the ship's depths. It was dusty, grimy work, yet essential, performed with a steady rhythm day and night under the glow of dockside lamps after sunset, ensuring the ship had the thousands of tons of fuel needed for the crossing. Simultaneously, the victualling department swung into high gear, overseeing the loading of provisions on a scale rarely seen before. Think of the sheer quantities needed to feed passengers and crew in the style expected of the White Star Line. Crates and sacks and barrels arrived constantly at the quayside, checked off lists by purser's clerks with pencils tucked behind their ears, and then carefully hoisted aboard by cranes or carried up gangways into the ship's vast storerooms and refrigerated chambers deep below decks. Imagine the lists. Mountains of fresh meat, 75,000 pounds of beef, pork, lamb, and veal, thousands of chickens and game birds, fresh fish, delivered daily, packed in glistening crushed ice, barrels of oysters, smelling faintly of the sea, countless crates of eggs, perhaps 40,000 fresh eggs, each one carefully handled, vast quantities of dairy, thousands of gallons of fresh milk in metal churns, hundreds of pounds of butter in wooden tubs, wheels of cheese wrapped in cloth, mountains of fresh vegetables, tons of potatoes with earthy skins, onions with papery husks, carrots, leafy greens still crisp from the market gardens. Crates upon crates of fruit, polished apples, fragrant oranges, bunches of grapes shrouded in tissue paper, exotic melons promising sweetness, sacks of flour for the onboard bakery, which would soon fill the lower decks with the warm, comforting aroma of fresh bread and pastries daily. Jars of jams and preserves gleaming like jewels on shelves, tins of biscuits, bags of sugar, salt, coffee beans, tea leaves, and the beverages. Thousands of bottles of wine and champagne, carefully selected vintages stored horizontally, in cool, dark cellars, hundreds of cases of beer and stout, countless bottles of spirits and liqueurs with colorful labels, crates of mineral water, cordials, syrups for the bars and dining rooms. Every item meticulously logged and stored by stewards moving with quiet purpose, ready to supply the ship's numerous galleys, pantries, and bars. It wasn't just food. Think of the linens, thousands upon thousands of freshly laundered, crisp, white tablecloths and napkins smelling faintly of starch, tens of thousands of bed sheets and pillowcases smooth and cool to the touch, countless towels of all sizes, from small hand towels to large bath sheets, all folded neatly and stored on shelves, ready to be distributed throughout the ships, cabins and dining areas by the stewards and stewardesses, ensuring every space felt fresh and welcoming. Crockery and glassware, thousands of plates, cups, saucers, bowls, bearing the elegant White Star Line crest in deep red or blue, thousands of glasses for water, wine, spirits, each one polished until it sparkled under the dim storeroom lights. Polished silverware by the ton, carefully arranged in felt-lined drawers. All carefully packed and stored, ready for setting. The tables in the various dining saloons transforming them into scenes of quiet elegance. Even the small details received careful attention. Boxes of thick, creamy stationery embossed with the ship's name for the writing rooms. Fresh flowers arriving daily, their delicate perfume a contrast to the salty air, ready to be arranged in silver vases throughout the public rooms and suites. Stacks of newspapers and magazines for passengers to peruse. Coal for the decorative. Fireplaces in the first-class lounge and suites, though the ship was centrally heated. The visual warmth and ambiance were considered important. Hundreds of deck chairs being stacked neatly on the promenade decks, awaiting passengers eager for sea air. All this activity unfolded with a surprising lack of chaos. Experienced dock workers, stevedores, and the ship's own victualling crew worked methodically, guided by foremen and purser's staff. Gangways bustled with activity, but it was an organized flow, supplies moving inwards, final touches being applied. Painters might be seen on small platforms touching up the gleaming white paintwork on the superstructure. Window cleaners ensuring every porthole and window sparkled, reflecting the gray Southampton sky. Electricians making final checks on the thousands of electric lights ensuring a warm glow would fill the ship at night. Engineers conducting quiet tests on pumps and auxiliary machinery, their low hum a sign of readiness from deep within. Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, was aboard during these final days in Southampton. He wasn't just seeing his creation off. He was sailing with her on the maiden voyage, accompanied by his guarantee group of Harland and Wolff specialists. They were there to observe the ship's performance under operational conditions, noting any minor adjustments or improvements needed for future vessels. Imagine Andrews, a quiet, thoughtful man walking the decks with his familiar notebook, his quiet gaze taking in every detail, ensuring everything was just so, conferring softly with Captain Smith or Chief Engineer Bell, perhaps pointing out a subtle feature or asking a gentle question. His presence was a reassurance, a sign of the builders' confidence in their creation. J. Bruce Ismay, the White Star Line chairman, was also present, overseeing the final preparations for the voyage he too would be making. His presence underscored the importance of this maiden journey, a symbol of the company's ambition and prestige. He might be seen conferring with Captain Smith or inspecting the first-class suites, ensuring everything met his exacting standards for luxury and comfort. The crew, many of whom had only just signed on in Southampton, were busy familiarizing themselves with the vast ship, a floating labyrinth of corridors and decks. Stewards learned the layout of their assigned corridors and cabins, memorizing room numbers and passenger names. Waiters studied the menus, practicing the pronunciation of French dishes. Engineers traced pipework deep in the ship's belly. Officers reviewed procedures and charts in the quiet of the bridge or chart room. There would have been drills, perhaps a quiet lifeboat drill, though tragically inadequate by later standards. Fire drills. Routines practiced to ensure readiness, all conducted with professional calm. The commands given in low, steady voices. Southampton itself held its breath as sailing day approached. Locals gathered at vantage points along the waterfront to gaze at the magnificent liner dominating the docks, her lights reflecting softly on the water at night. Newsboys shouted headlines about the impending voyage. In the White Star offices near the docks, clerks dealt with last-minute passenger inquiries and finalized bookings, the telegraph machine clicking softly in the background. There was a palpable sense of anticipation in the air, but it was a gentle hum rather than a frantic buzz. The quiet pride of a port city sending forth the latest, greatest queen of the ocean. As the departure date drew closer, the final preparations intensified, but the pace remained measured, deliberate. The ship was being polished, provisioned, perfected, made ready not just for a journey but for her grand debut on the world stage. The human element, the careful planning, the meticulous attention to detail, all converging in these final days at Southampton, creating a pocket of calm readiness before the gentle giant stirred, before she cast off her lines and pointed her bow towards the open sea, towards the horizon, towards her destiny. Let the image of the great ship resting quietly at the Southampton dock, fully provisioned and poised for her journey, linger for a moment. Feel the calm readiness, the potential energy held within her massive form. Now, allow that scene to gently transition as the morning of Wednesday, April 10th, 1912 dawns. Sailing day. The air in Southampton that morning held a unique quality, a blend of ordinary port activity and extraordinary anticipation. The sky might have been overcast, or perhaps patches of pale spring sunshine broke through the clouds, glinting off the calm waters of the Solent. Along the quayside near berth 44, the usual dockside sounds continued. The rumble of carts, the distant calls of gulls, the low hoot of a ferry. But overlaying it all was a subtle, growing hum of excitement, kept respectfully subdued as befitted the departure of such a prestigious liner. From mid-morning onwards, the passengers began to arrive. Not in a chaotic rush, but in a steady, measured stream, arriving by special boat trains from London Waterloo Station, by motor car, or by carriage. Imagine the scene at the dockside entrance to the White Star dock, a quiet procession of people, from all walks of life, drawn together by their shared destination aboard this magnificent new ship. First, perhaps, came the third-class passengers, the emigrants seeking new lives and opportunities in America and Canada. They arrived carrying modest luggage, bundles tied with rope, battered suitcases, wicker baskets containing their worldly possessions. There might have been families huddled together, parents keeping a watchful eye on excited children, their faces a mixture of hope, apprehension, and wonder as they gazed up at the towering black hull that represented their passage to a different future. They moved quietly through the designated third-class entrance, their documents checked by clerks before being guided along the quay and up the less ornate gangways leading to their accommodation deep within the ship. For many, this was the biggest vessel they had ever seen, a floating city promising safety and a new beginning. Then came the second-class passengers, perhaps arriving by taxi or a slightly more comfortable train carriage. They represented the professional classes, teachers, engineers, clergymen, merchants, tourists of moderate means. Their luggage was more substantial, steamer trunks and valises handled by porters. They likely approached the ship with a sense of quiet satisfaction, looking forward to the comfort and respectability offered by Titanic's highly regarded second-class accommodation. They ascended their own gangway, perhaps pausing to admire the ship's clean lines and impressive size before stepping aboard into the neat, mahogany-paneled entrance hall designated for them. And finally, the first-class passengers arrived, making their entrance with an air of understated elegance. Limousines and luxurious motor cars pulled up near the main first-class gangway, disgorging wealthy industrialists, financiers, society figures, artists, writers, returning American millionaires, and European aristocracy. Figures like John Jacob Astor IV, arguably the richest man aboard, returning with his young new wife Madeline, Benjamin Guggenheim, the mining tycoon, Isidore Straus, co-owner of Macy's department store, and his devoted wife Ida, Sir Cosmo, Duff Gordon and his wife, the fashion designer known as Lucille, Margaret Brown, later famously known as Molly, whose vibrant personality perhaps already shone through. They were dressed in the height of Edwardian fashion, the men in tailored suits or traveling coats, the ladies in elegant dresses, elaborate hats adorned with feathers or flowers, perhaps carrying parasols. Their mountains of luggage, wardrobe trunks, hat boxes, leather suitcases bearing prestigious labels, were efficiently handled by uniformed porters and White Star Line staff. They ascended the main gangway, likely greeted personally by Chief Purser McElroy or his assistants, stepping directly into the opulent reception room adjoining the grand staircase, their first taste of the luxury that awaited them. Imagine the quiet bustle within the ship as passengers found their cabins. Stewards, calm and courteous, guided them through the maze of corridors, carrying bags, explaining the cabin features, the electric lights, the heaters, the call bells. Stewardesses assisted ladies with their unpacking, carefully hanging gowns and wardrobes. Bellboys ran errands. In third class, families settled into their assigned cabins, perhaps sharing with strangers, the atmosphere a mix of excitement and uncertainty. In second class, passengers explored their comfortable surroundings, perhaps meeting their cabin mates. In first class, valets and maids unpacked trunks in spacious suites, while their employers might take a first stroll along the enclosed promenade deck or greet acquaintances in the lounge. On the decks outside, final preparations continued with quiet efficiency. Mail bags containing thousands of letters and parcels were hoisted aboard for the Royal Mail steamer Titanic to carry. Last-minute provisions might arrive. Visitors who had come to see off friends or relatives began to take their leave, descending the gangways after final farewells. Officers stood watch on the bridge, overseeing the final checks. Engineers conducted last-minute tests in the engine rooms, the gentle thrumming beneath the decks a constant reassurance of the power held in readiness. As noon approached, the scheduled departure time, the activity reached a quiet crescendo. The ship's whistle sounded, a deep resonant blast that echoed across the water in the city, signaling imminent departure. It wasn't a frantic sound, but a stately announcement. On the quayside, a crowd had gathered, a mixture of onlookers, well-wishers and White Star Line officials. There was no loud cheering, perhaps just a murmur of conversation, a sense of occasion. Slowly, the gangways were withdrawn, severing the last physical links to the shore. Tugboats, small and sturdy, maneuvered into position alongside the giant liner, ready to assist her departure from the tight confines of the dock. On the bridge, Captain Smith, alongside the harbor pilot responsible for navigating the ship out of port, gave quiet commands. Orders were relayed via the engine order, telegraphed to the engine room far below. Slow ahead, half ahead. Deep within the ship, steam hissed. Massive pistons began to move and the giant propellers started to turn, churning the water at the stern. With painstaking slowness, the immense vessel began to move. Thick mooring ropes were cast off from the quayside bollards and hauled aboard. The gap between the ship and the dock widened inch by inch. The tugboats nudged and pulled, guiding Titanic's bow out into the main channel of Southampton water, known as the Test. Passengers lined the railings, on the promenade decks waving handkerchiefs to the small figures receding on the quay. Those on shore waved back. It was a scene repeated countless times in the age of ocean liner travel, yet imbued with a special significance by the maiden voyage of this extraordinary ship. There was a moment of unexpected quiet drama as Titanic passed the liners, Oceanic, and New York, moored nearby due to the coal strike. The sheer volume of water displaced by Titanic's massive hull created a powerful suction effect. The mooring ropes holding the smaller liner New York snapped with sharp reports like muted gunshots. The stern of the New York swung out rapidly towards the Titanic. For a moment, a collision seemed imminent. Quick action by Captain Smith, ordering. The engines reversed and the swift intervention of a nearby tugboat, which managed to get a line on the New York and pull her clear, averted disaster by a mere few feet. The incident caused a delay of about an hour, a quiet ripple in the otherwise smooth departure, perhaps seen by some as an unsettling omen, but quickly managed with professional calm. Once clear of the potential hazard, Titanic resumed her stately progress down Southampton water. The pilot guided her carefully through the busy waterway past the Isle of Wight. Passengers settled into the rhythm of the ship, exploring the decks, finding comfortable spots in the lounges, perhaps enjoying their first luncheon aboard in the magnificent dining saloons. The initial excitement of departure gave way to the gentle routines of life at sea. As the afternoon wore on, Titanic reached the open waters of the English Channel. The harbor pilot disembarked onto a waiting pilot boat, his job done. Captain Smith now had full command. The ship increased speed, her wake stretching out behind her, a long white ribbon on the gray-green water. The coastline of England became a distant smudge, then disappeared entirely. Ahead lay the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. The atmosphere aboard settled into one of quiet anticipation for the journey ahead. The gentle motion of the ship, the steady thrum of the engines, the fresh sea air, all combined to create a sense of peace and security. Passengers began to mingle. Conversations started. The musicians played softly in the background. The world of Southampton, the dockside bustle, the snapped mooring ropes, all faded into memory. The great ship was finally underway, carrying her diverse community of souls westward, enveloped in an aura of luxury, power, and serene confidence. Sailing smoothly towards her first port of call, Cherbourg in France, as dusk began to gently fall. Let the image of the great ship sailing smoothly into the twilight fade gently from your mind. Feel the steady, almost imperceptible rhythm of the engines, the gentle rise and fall of the vessel on the calm sea. We move now from the collective act of departure into the individual experiences unfolding within the ship, specifically within the gilded world of first class. For the few hundred passengers traveling in first class aboard the Titanic, the maiden voyage promised an experience akin to staying in the finest luxury hotel, combined with the gentle thrill of ocean travel. Life aboard settled into a serene rhythm, governed by mealtimes, social customs, and the pursuit of quiet leisure. It was a world largely insulated from the mechanics of the ship and the lives of those traveling in other classes. A self-contained bubble of Edwardian elegance and privilege floating across the vast Atlantic. Imagine waking up in a first-class stateroom or suite. Perhaps the soft light of morning filters through the curtains covering the porthole, revealing a glimpse of the endless blue-gray ocean outside. The room itself is a haven of comfort, a plush carpet underfoot, walls paneled in polished wood or covered in silk damask, a comfortable bedstead, often brass or carved wood, piled high with soft pillows and crisp linen sheets. The gentle hum of the ship is barely audible, a low, soothing vibration. A discreet call bell summons a steward or stewardess who arrives almost instantly, perhaps with a morning cup of tea or coffee served in delicate china, or to draw a bath in the private ensuite bathroom, itself a marvel of modern plumbing, with hot and cold running water, a luxury still rare even in many fine homes on land. Breakfast could be taken in the privacy of one's suite, served course by a personal steward, or enjoyed in the magnificent first-class dining saloon, down on D-deck. Picture this vast, Jacobean-inspired room in the morning light, perhaps less formally populated than at dinner. Sunlight streams through the large, leaded glass windows, illuminating the white-painted paneling and the tables laid with fresh white linen. Passengers might greet acquaintances with a quiet nod, exchange pleasantries, or simply read a newspaper, delivered on board while enjoying a leisurely meal. Perhaps kippers, grilled ham, fresh eggs cooked to order, toast with marmalade, fresh fruit, all served with quiet efficiency by attentive waiters. The morning hours offered various gentle pursuits. Many passengers enjoyed taking the air on the spacious promenade deck, reserved exclusively for first class. This wide, sheltered walkway encircled much of the upper part of the ship, offering uninterrupted views of the ocean. Imagine ladies, in elegant walking dresses and hats, perhaps accompanied by gentlemen in tweed jackets, strolling slowly along the deck, pausing to chat or simply gaze out at the horizon. Deck stewards would be on hand to arrange comfortable deck chairs, tucking passengers in with warm steamer rugs against the cool Atlantic breeze, perhaps offering a cup of hot bouillon later in the morning. The rhythmic pacing back and forth, the fresh sea air, the vastness of the ocean stretching in every direction. It created a sense of peaceful detachment from the world left behind. For the more energetic, the gymnasium on the boat deck offered novel distractions. Equipped with the latest fitness contraptions, electric horses, rowing machines, cycling machines, even an electric camel, it provided a place for gentle exercise under the guidance of the gymnasium instructor, Mr. T.W. Macaulay. Picture: gentlemen in flannel trousers or ladies in sporty attire trying out the machines, perhaps with a sense of amusement at their novelty. Others might seek the quiet refuge of the ship's elegant public rooms. The reading and writing room, with its delicate Georgian decor and large windows, was a favorite spot for ladies to pen letters on the ship's crested stationery or dip into the latest novels. Imagine the quiet atmosphere, the soft scratch of pen on paper, the scent of fresh flowers in vases. The lounge, inspired by Versailles, offered deep armchairs and sofas for quiet conversation, reading, or simply relaxing. Stewards moved discreetly, serving coffee or tea. Perhaps a game of cards, bridge was very popular, might be quietly underway in a corner. The library alcoves offered a selection of books for borrowing. Children traveling in first class were not forgotten, though they were generally expected to be kept under the watchful eyes of nannies or governesses. They might play quiet games, in their suites be taken for supervised walks on deck, or perhaps enjoy meals in the dining saloon at earlier sittings. As midday approached, the ship's orchestra, led by Wallace Hartley, might begin to play softly in the reception room outside the dining saloon or in the lounge. Gentle melodies, popular tunes of the day, light classical pieces, providing a soothing backdrop to the morning's activities. Their music was an integral part of the first-class ambiance, adding a touch of refined entertainment without being intrusive. Luncheon, served in the dining saloon, was another grand affair, though perhaps slightly less formal than dinner. The menu offered a wide array of choices: cold buffets, hot dishes, salads, desserts, all prepared with the finest ingredients by the ship's skilled chefs. Conversations flowed, acquaintanceships deepened, plans might be made for the afternoon. The afternoon offered further opportunities for relaxation and gentle activity. Some might retire to their cabins for a nap. Others might return to the promenade deck for another stroll, or to relax in a deck chair, perhaps dozing softly in the sea air. The Veranda Cafe and Palm Court, with their light, airy atmosphere and wicker furniture, provided a pleasant spot for afternoon tea, sheltered from the wind but offering fine sea views. For those seeking deeper relaxation, the Turkish Baths complex offered a unique sanctuary. Imagine descending to this quiet, exotic space, changing into a robe, and experiencing the sequence of warm rooms, the steam room, a refreshing splash pool, perhaps a gentle massage, followed by repose on a cushioned couch in the intricately tiled cooling room, sipping mint tea. It was an escape within an escape, designed for ultimate tranquility. The squash rackets court provided a more vigorous option for a few gentlemen, requiring booking in advance. The sharp thwack of the ball echoing in the enclosed court would be a contrast to the general quietude of the ship. As late afternoon melted into early evening, passengers would begin to retire to their cabins to rest and change for dinner. This was a significant ritual in first-class Edwardian society. Gentlemen would don formal evening wear, white tie and tails, while ladies would appear in their most elegant gowns, often showcasing elaborate hairstyles and sparkling jewelry. Valets and maids would be busy assisting with dressing, ensuring every detail was perfect. Before dinner, passengers might gather in the opulent reception room outside the dining saloon on D deck. This large, comfortable space, decorated in the Jacobean style with plush carpets and comfortable seating, served as an anteroom where people could meet, converse, and enjoy an aperitif before proceeding into dinner. The ship's orchestra would likely be playing here, their gentle music filling the air as elegantly dressed passengers mingled, the soft murmur of conversation blending with the melodies. Dinner itself was the social highlight of the day. Entering the magnificent dining saloon, passengers were escorted to their assigned tables by impeccably dressed headwaiters. The room glowed under the soft light of electric lamps and perhaps table lamps with silk shades. The tables gleamed with polished silver, sparkling crystal, and fine china. The multi-course menu offered an astonishing array of choices, showcasing French haute cuisine at its finest. Oysters, consommé, poached salmon, filet mignon, roast duckling, elaborate vegetable preparations, rich desserts, savory finales. Each course was paired with carefully selected wines, served with quiet expertise by the attentive stewards. Conversation flowed, laughter perhaps rippled softly, but the overall atmosphere remained one of dignified elegance and decorum. After dinner, the evening offered further diversions. Many passengers would adjourn to the lounge for coffee, liqueurs, and conversation. The orchestra might relocate here, continuing their performance. Card games might resume. Others, particularly the gentlemen, would retreat to the masculine ambiance of the smoking room for cigars, brandy, and quiet discussion. Decorated in dark mahogany with comfortable leather chairs, it was a sanctuary for male camaraderie. Ladies might gather in the reading and writing room for a final chat before retiring. For those seeking a more intimate, exclusive experience, the a la carte restaurant on B deck offered an alternative to the main dining saloon. Here, passengers could dine at tables for 2 or 4, ordering from a separate, extensive menu at additional cost, enjoying the ambiance of a top Parisian or London restaurant, complete with its own dedicated kitchen and staff. The adjacent Café Parisien, with its trellis work and large windows overlooking the sea, offered a charming spot for coffee or a nightcap, evoking the atmosphere of a continental sidewalk cafe, a place to see and be seen in a more relaxed setting. As the evening drew to a close, passengers would gradually drift back to their cabins. Stewards moved silently through the corridors, perhaps turning down beds, ensuring everything was in order. The public rooms slowly emptied. The lights dimmed. The orchestra played its final notes. Soon the only sounds were the gentle creak of the ship's structure, the distant steady thrum of the engines deep below, and the soft sigh of the ocean outside the portholes. The first-class world settled into quiet repose, cocooned in luxury and security, ready to awaken to another serene day at sea, gliding effortlessly across the dark, peaceful Atlantic. Let the images of first-class grandeur, the glittering chandeliers, the plush velvet, the formal dinners, gently dissolve now, like breath on a cold window pane. Our focus drifts away from the peak of luxury, moving through the ship to explore the experiences of those traveling in second and third class. Their worlds aboard the Titanic were different, certainly, yet offered a level of comfort and dignity that was remarkable for the time, representing a significant step up from the usual standards of ocean travel for the less affluent. Imagine descending, perhaps via a less ornate but still handsome staircase into the realm of second class. This section of the ship housed a diverse group of passengers, professionals, academics, clergy, merchants, tourists, and families of comfortable but not extravagant means. They occupied well-appointed cabins, primarily located midship or slightly aft across several decks. While not as spacious or lavishly decorated as first-class suites, these cabins were surprisingly comfortable and pleasant. Picture rooms paneled, in polished sycamore or oak, furnished with comfortable berths, often upper and lower, a wash basin with running water, a significant convenience, perhaps a small settee or chair, and adequate wardrobe space. The floors were covered in durable, patterned linoleum, easy to keep clean, and the overall impression was one of neatness, solidity, and quiet respectability. Life in second class followed its own gentle rhythm, mirroring some aspects of first class but on a more modest scale. Passengers had their own dedicated public rooms, ensuring a sense of community and separation from both first and third class. The second-class dining saloon, located further aft on D deck, was a large, elegant room in its own right. Paneled in light oak and featuring long tables arranged in a communal style, it fostered a more sociable atmosphere than the separate tables of first class. Large windows let in natural light, and the room was decorated with carved pillars and comfortable, swiveling chairs upholstered in red leather. Here, passengers enjoyed substantial multi-course meals served by attentive stewards. The quality of the food was excellent, comparable to good restaurants ashore, offering hearty British fare alongside more sophisticated dishes. Imagine the pleasant murmur of conversation, the clink of cutlery, the sense of shared experience as passengers dined together. Beyond the dining saloon, second-class passengers had access to other comfortable spaces. There was a dedicated library. On C deck, a handsome room paneled in sycamore and mahogany, furnished with comfortable chairs and tables, and stocked with a good selection of books and periodicals. It provided a quiet haven for reading, writing letters, or engaging in quiet conversation. Picture passengers relaxing here after lunch, perhaps reading a novel or gazing thoughtfully out of the large windows at the passing sea. A second-class smoking room, located aft on B deck, offered a comfortable retreat for gentlemen. Paneled in oak and furnished with leather armchairs, it provided a space for enjoying a pipe or cigarette, reading newspapers, playing cards, or engaging in conversation. While perhaps less opulent than its first-class counterpart, it offered a similar sense of club-like comfort. Second-class passengers also had their own designated open deck space, the poop deck at the very stern of the ship, and a portion of the boat deck. Here, they could stroll, take the sea air, play deck games like shuffleboard or quoits, or simply relax on benches and watch the ship's wake stretching out behind. It was a place for gentle recreation and enjoying the vastness of the ocean, offering views just as expansive as those from the first-class promenades. The overall atmosphere in second class was one of comfortable respectability and quiet enjoyment. It lacked the overt luxury and social formality of first class, but provided a standard of travel far superior to what most passengers in this category would have experienced on other liners. It was a world of its own, pleasant, orderly, and serene. Now let your focus drift further down, deeper into the ship, towards the forward and aft sections on the lower decks. Here resided the largest group of passengers, those traveling, in third class often referred to as steerage. This group was perhaps the most diverse of all, comprising emigrants from across Britain, Ireland, Scandinavia, and other parts of Europe, all seeking new opportunities in the promise of America, or Canada. There were single men seeking work, families hoping for a fresh start, young women traveling to join relatives or start new lives. Their hopes and dreams were perhaps the most poignant cargo the Titanic carried. Historically, steerage travel had often meant enduring cramped, unsanitary conditions in large open dormitories. White Star Line, however, recognizing both the importance of the emigrant trade and a growing sense of social responsibility, and perhaps competition, had designed Titanic's third-class accommodation to be a significant improvement. Instead of vast dormitories, passengers were housed in smaller enclosed cabins typically containing 2, 4, 6, 8, or 10 berths, bunk beds. While simple, these cabins were clean and adequately ventilated. They were fitted with wooden bunks with mattresses, pillows, and blankets, wash basins, though usually with cold water only, and hooks for clothes. Families could often secure a cabin to themselves, offering a degree of privacy previously unknown in steerage. The cabins were located in the forward and aft sections of the ship, on the lower decks, E, F, and G. Corridors were plainly finished, perhaps painted white or cream, with linoleum floors. While basic compared to the upper decks, the overall environment was designed to be clean, orderly, and far more humane than the steerage conditions on older ships. Third-class passengers also had their own designated public spaces. A large third-class dining saloon, located midships on F deck, provided meals in 2 sittings. This room was simpler than its second-class counterpart, with long tables and benches, but it was clean, bright and paneled in white enamel with sturdy furniture. Passengers received 3 substantial meals a day, featuring plain but plentiful food: stews, soups, potatoes, bread, tea. While not luxurious, the meals were nourishing and represented good value, far better than the self-catering often required in older steerage arrangements. In addition to the dining saloon, there was a third-class general room located forward, on sea deck. This served as a social hub, a place where passengers could gather, talk, perhaps play cards or music. Imagine this space filled with the chatter of different languages, the sound of an accordion or fiddle being played, children playing, games on the floor, adults sharing stories and hopes for the future. It would have been a lively, communal atmosphere, fostering connections among people embarking on similar life-changing journeys. A third-class smoking room was also provided, typically used by the men, offering a space for conversation and relaxation, away from the main general room. Furnished simply with wooden benches and tables, it provided a basic amenity for those who smoked. Crucially, third-class passengers had designated open deck space for fresh air and exercise. This included the forward well deck, between the forecastle and the main superstructure, and the aft well deck, between the raised poop deck and the aft superstructure. While perhaps less sheltered and certainly less spacious than the upper, promenade decks, these areas allowed steerage passengers to escape the confines of the lower decks, breathe the sea air, watch the waves, and socialize outdoors. Imagine children running and playing in the well deck, adults leaning on the railings gazing out at the seemingly endless ocean, perhaps dreaming of the land that lay beyond the horizon. Life in third class was undoubtedly simpler and more communal than in the upper classes. There was less privacy, fewer amenities, and a clear separation from the more luxurious parts of the ship. Yet for its time, Titanic's third class represented a significant advancement. Passengers were treated with a degree of dignity, provided with clean accommodation, decent food, and dedicated social spaces. For many immigrants who had saved for years for this passage, the conditions aboard Titanic, while basic, likely felt like a considerable improvement over what they were leaving behind, and a hopeful start to their new lives. The ship, then, contained these distinct yet interconnected worlds. First class enveloped in serene luxury, second class enjoying comfortable respectability, third class traveling in improved, hopeful simplicity. Each group experienced the voyage differently, yet all were aboard the same magnificent vessel, gliding smoothly across the calm Atlantic, carried along by the same powerful engines under the same vast sky. The gentle thrum of the ship, the endless horizon, the shared experience of being at sea, these were constants, binding all souls aboard together, regardless of class or circumstance. As the Titanic continued her peaceful journey westward, let the images of the passengers, strolling the decks, dining in the saloon, settling into their cabins, gently fade from view now, like reflections dissolving on water. We journey deeper into the great ship, far below the waterline, away from the polished wood and plush carpets into a realm rarely seen by passengers, yet utterly vital to the ship's existence, the domain of the unseen machinery and the dedicated crew who tended it. This was the beating heart of the Titanic, a world of controlled power, rhythmic sound, and quiet vigilance. Imagine descending flight after flight of steep metal ladders and companionways, perhaps feeling the metal cool beneath your hand, leaving behind the natural light and passenger comforts. Each step takes you further into the ship's core, the sounds from above fading, replaced by a growing, deep resonance. You enter a world illuminated by the steady glow of electric lamps reflecting off painted steel bulkheads and polished machinery. The air grows warmer here, carrying the faint, clean scent of hot oil and steam, a strangely comforting aroma of power under control, and the deep, resonant hum begins to fill your senses. Not a harsh noise, but a steady, powerful vibration traveling through the very structure of the ship, the lifeblood coursing through its metallic veins, a constant reminder of the forces at play. We arrive first in the vast engine room located deep within the hull towards the stern. This cavernous space housed the main propulsion machinery, two enormous triple-expansion reciprocating steam engines. Picture these giants. Towering structures of steel, 3 stories high, with massive cylinders, connecting rods and crankshafts, gleaming under the lights. Each engine drove one of the outer propellers. They weren't designed for frantic speed, but for immense, reliable power, turning with a slow, majestic rhythm, perhaps around 75 revolutions per minute at full speed. Imagine the gleam of polished steel and brass under the electric lights, the slow, hypnotic rise and fall of the massive pistons within their cylinders, the gentle hiss of steam entering and escaping, the rhythmic sigh as power was translated into motion through the immense crankshafts turning below. It was a symphony of controlled force, a metallic ballet overseen by the watchful eyes of the engineering officers from graded catwalks above and beside the machinery. These engineers, dressed perhaps in white boiler suits or overalls, often stained with grease despite their efforts, moved with quiet confidence through the space. Their ears were attuned to the slightest variation in the engine's steady song, capable of diagnosing a potential issue purely by a change in rhythm or tone. They monitored banks of gauges, steam pressure, temperature, revolutions per minute, their dials glowing softly in the lamplight, needles holding steady. They moved methodically, checking lubrication points, ensuring every moving part received the vital oil it needed from intricate networks of pipes and reservoirs. They listened, they watched, they felt the rhythm of the machinery through the soles of their feet on the vibrating steel deck plates. Chief Engineer Joseph Bell and his team of senior and junior engineers, men like William Farquharson or Herbert Harvey, bore the immense responsibility of keeping this mechanical heart beating perfectly, ensuring the ship maintained its steady pace across the ocean day and night. Adjacent to the main reciprocating engines was another marvel of engineering, relatively new for its time, a low-pressure Parsons turbine. This third engine utilized the exhaust steam from the 2 reciprocating engines, steam that would otherwise have gone to waste, to drive the central propeller. This innovative design increased both the ship's power and its efficiency, contributing significantly to the smooth, vibration-free ride that White Star Line prized. The turbine itself, enclosed within its heavy steel casing, operated with a higher-pitched, smoother hum compared to the deep thudding of the reciprocating engines, adding another layer to the engine room's complex soundscape. It represented the cutting edge of marine engineering, quietly adding its power to the ship's progress. Moving forward from the engine room, passing through watertight doors designed to seal off compartments in an emergency, we enter the domain of the boilers. The source of all the steam that powered the engines generated electricity, heated the ship, and even powered the whistles. Titanic had 29 boilers housed in 6 separate boiler rooms, or stokeholds, stretching like huge metal lungs along the lower decks. 24 of these were large double-ended boilers, meaning they had furnaces at both ends, and 5 were smaller single-ended ones located in the forwardmost boiler room. Imagine entering one of these stokeholds, a vast hot space dominated by the immense cylindrical forms of the boilers, their riveted steel faces punctuated by multiple furnace doors, perhaps 157 furnaces in total across the ship. Here worked the firemen, or stokers, and the trimmers, the black gang as they were sometimes called due to the nature of their work. This was arguably the most physically demanding job on the ship. The firemen, often stripped to the waist in the intense heat, worked in shifts, typically 4 hours on, 8 hours off around the clock, feeding the hungry furnaces. Picture them, their bodies glistening with sweat in the fiery glow from the open furnace doors, rhythmically swinging heavy shovels laden with coal, aiming for just the right spot within the roaring inferno to maintain an even firebed and optimal combustion. The heat was immense, radiating from the boilers, the air thick with coal dust, yet they worked with a practiced, almost mechanical efficiency, their movements economical despite the exertion, knowing that the ship's speed depended directly on their efforts. Behind them, in the vast coal bunkers flanking the boiler rooms, worked the trimmers. Their job was to move the coal from the outer reaches of the bunkers towards the stokeholds, ensuring a constant supply was available for the firemen, working, often in near darkness, guided only by the dim light of safety lamps. They shoveled and wheeled tons of coal, navigating the shifting black landscape within the bunkers, sometimes working on precarious slopes of coal. It was dusty, grimy, relentless work, essential to keep the ship moving, performed in confined spaces far from the daylight. Overseeing the boiler rooms were the leading firemen, or stokers, experienced hands who ensured the fires were burning efficiently and the steam pressure remained constant. They managed the teams, monitored the water levels in the boilers using glass gauges, a critical task to prevent explosions, and coordinated the flow of coal. They understood the temperament of the boilers, the quality of the coal, the demands of the engines. Despite the heat and the labor, there was a sense of order, a disciplined routine that kept this vital part of the ship functioning smoothly, shift after shift. Think of the sounds here: the roar of the fires when the furnace doors were opened for feeding, the clang of shovels on the steel floor plates, the hiss of steam escaping from valves, the rumble of coal cascading down chutes, the low voices of the leading firemen giving instructions. Yet imagine it all slightly muted from the outside, softened by the sheer scale of the ship, blending into a deep, powerful drone rather than a cacophony. The sound of immense energy being generated and controlled. Beyond the main engines and boilers, Titanic housed a complex network of auxiliary machinery, each piece playing its part. There were the electrical generating plants, 4 massive dynamos driven by their own steam engines producing more electricity than many small towns of the era. This plant, located in its own compartment near the engine room, powered the ship's thousands of electric lights, the ventilation fans circulating air throughout the vessel, the 8 elevators whisking passengers between decks, the powerful Marconi wireless telegraph connecting the ship to the outside world, the electric heater supplementing the steam heating system, the complex equipment in the galleys and numerous pumps. Imagine the steady hum of these generators, the heartbeat of the ship's electrical system, tended by skilled electricians like Peter Sloan, who ensured a constant flow of power throughout the vessel, bringing light and convenience to every corner. There were huge refrigeration plants using ammonia or CO2 systems to keep the tons of meat, fish, and dairy in the ship's insulated larders perfectly chilled, ensuring fresh food throughout the voyage. There were powerful pumps for bilge water, removing any water that collected in the bottom of the hull, pumps for sanitation systems, pumps for providing fresh and salt water throughout the ship for baths, wash basins, and galleys. There were steering engines, powerful hydraulic machines located in a compartment near the stern, translating the movements of the ship's wheel on the bridge, via telemotors, into the turning of the massive rudder far below, guiding the ship's course. All this machinery required constant maintenance and supervision. Engineers, electricians, boilermakers, plumbers, a small army of skilled technicians worked tirelessly behind the scenes, ensuring every system functioned as intended. Greasers moved through the engine rooms, ensuring bearings and moving parts were adequately lubricated. Boilermakers might inspect seams or tubes during quieter periods. Plumbers maintained the intricate network of pipes. They were the unseen guardians of the ship's mechanical and electrical integrity, their expertise crucial for the safety and comfort of everyone aboard. Consider the contrast between this hidden world of heat, metal, and controlled power, and the serene luxury of the passenger decks above. Few passengers would have had any conception of the sheer scale of the machinery beneath their feet, or the relentless human effort required to keep it running smoothly and quietly. Yet the smooth progress of the ship, the bright lights illuminating the grand rooms, the warm air circulating through the cabins, the readily available hot water for a bath, all depended entirely on the reliable functioning of this unseen world and the dedication of the men who worked there, often in challenging conditions. Even during the quiet night hours as passengers slept soundly in their beds, this hidden heart of the ship never slept. Shifts changed with quiet efficiency, men relieving each other at their posts. Engineers continued their rounds, monitoring gauges under the steady glow of lamps, listening to the familiar sounds of their charges. Firemen continued their rhythmic dance before the furnaces, their faces illuminated by the flickering firelight. The dynamos hummed steadily, providing the power for the few lights left burning in corridors and essential areas. The great engines turned without pause, driving the ship onward through the darkness. It was a constant, quiet vigil, ensuring the great ship continued her serene passage across the dark, silent ocean, a testament to human ingenuity and the tireless spirit of the men who commanded the machines. Let the deep rhythmic hum of the engines and the images of the hard-working engineering crew fade gently into the background, like a distant, reassuring heartbeat. Our focus returns to the passenger decks, but now we embrace the broader atmosphere of the ship as she sails smoothly through the vast open expanse of the mid-Atlantic. These were the days of serene routine, of quiet confidence, the calm before the unforeseen. Imagine the Titanic, now several days out from Southampton, having called briefly at Cherbourg in France and Queenstown, now Cobh in Ireland, to pick up more passengers and mail. She is now fully committed to her westward journey, a solitary, magnificent vessel in the immense emptiness of the North Atlantic. The weather, for the most part, has been kind. Perhaps there were days with gentle swells, causing the great ship to pitch and roll ever so slightly, a motion barely perceptible to those aboard, testament to her size and stability, a gentle rocking, like being cradled in giant, steady arms. Other days might have dawned bright and clear, the sun sparkling on a calm, deep blue sea stretching to an unbroken horizon in all directions, the air tasting clean and salty. Life aboard has settled into a comfortable, predictable rhythm for all classes. The novelty of the ship's grandeur has perhaps worn off slightly for the seasoned travelers, replaced by the gentle routines of ocean travel. Mealtimes punctuate the day, social interactions follow established patterns, and the I-faced ship itself feels like a secure, self-contained world, gliding effortlessly through the water. The sheer scale of the vessel fosters a sense of immense security. It feels less like being on a ship and more like being within a grand, moving piece of land, solid and unshakable. In first class, the days unfold with quiet elegance. Mornings might begin with a leisurely breakfast, followed by a constitutional stroll on the promenade deck, the crisp sea air invigorating despite its chill. Deck chairs are occupied by passengers reading, dozing, or engaging in quiet conversation, tucked warmly under steamer rugs provided by attentive stewards. Perhaps the ship's orchestra plays softly in the lounge, its melodies, maybe a gentle Strauss waltz or a popular tune from a recent musical, drifting out onto the deck, barely competing with the soft sigh of the wind. The gymnasium sees its usual patrons, while others might indulge in a session in the Turkish baths or take a dip in the heated swimming pool. Still a remarkable novelty, the warm water a surprising contrast to the cold ocean outside. Luncheon is followed by quiet afternoons. Card games, bridge, whist, perhaps poker in the smoking room, are popular pastimes, played with quiet concentration at sturdy tables. Ladies might gather for afternoon tea in the lounge or the veranda cafe, discussing fashion, travel plans, or news from home. Their voices a soft murmur against the clink of teacups. Reading and writing letters occupy many hours. Passengers catching up on correspondence or losing themselves in novels from the ship's library. Some passengers might simply sit and watch the endless ocean slide by, lost in thought, mesmerized by the vastness and the rhythmic motion of the waves, feeling a profound sense of peace and detachment from the cares of the world left behind on land. In second class, life is perhaps a little more sociable, but equally serene. Passengers make use of their own library, smoking room, and deck spaces. Friendships are formed over meals in the dining saloon or during games of shuffleboard on the poop deck. The scrape of the discs a gentle rhythmic sound. Families enjoy time together, watching their children play safely within the confines of the designated areas, their laughter perhaps carrying on the breeze. There's a sense of shared experience, of comfortable community, as they journey towards their destinations, enjoying comforts far exceeding those on lesser liners. Even in third class, a routine establishes itself. Meals are taken in the bustling dining saloon, the simple, hearty food eagerly anticipated. The general room becomes a hub of social activity, filled with chatter in various languages, Irish brogues mingling with Scandinavian accents, Italian cadences alongside English dialects. Laughter rings out, perhaps music from a passenger's own instrument, a fiddle striking up a lively jig, an accordion playing a melancholic folk tune, a set of pipes adding a haunting drone. Children play games on the floor, their energy contained within the space, while adults share stories and dreams of the new lives awaiting them. On the open well decks, weather permitting, passengers gather for fresh air, children play tag, adults lean on the railings, gazing out at the seemingly endless ocean, perhaps pointing out seabirds or simply feeling the vastness, their hopes as wide as the horizon. Across all classes, the ship itself provides a constant sense of security. Her immense size, the steady beat of her engines felt as a low thrum deep within, the visible presence of the officers on the bridge and the crew, going about their duties with quiet efficiency, all contribute to an atmosphere of profound confidence. This is the largest ship in the world, the latest marvel of technology, operated by the reputable White Star Line and commanded by the experienced Captain Smith. Passengers feel safe, cocooned within this floating island of order and progress. The gentle motion, the solid feel of the decks, the knowledge of the powerful machinery below, it all conspires to create a feeling of serene invulnerability. Imagine the evenings during these mid-Atlantic days. As dusk falls, the ship transforms into a constellation of lights against the darkening ocean. Inside, the public rooms glow warmly. Dinner is served with its customary ritual in each class. Afterwards, passengers might enjoy music, conversation, or a quiet drink before retiring. On the outer decks, under a canopy of brilliant stars undimmed by city lights, some might take a final stroll, bundled against the cold night air, marveling at the immensity of the universe above and the dark ocean below. The only sounds are the soft sigh of the wind through the rigging, the gentle hiss of the waves along the hull, and the distant, steady pulse of the engines. The cold air feels clean and sharp, carrying the scent of the pure, empty ocean. Wireless messages crackle through the ether in the Marconi room, manned by operators Jack Phillips and Harold Bride. They are busy sending and receiving passenger telegrams, messages of business, greetings to loved ones, updates on the journey, relaying them via shore stations like Cape Race or other ships encountered along the route. Amidst this commercial traffic, other messages occasionally arrive, warnings from other vessels: the Coronia, the Baltic, the America, the Californian, the Mesaba, about ice encountered further along the route, sometimes giving specific coordinates for large bergs or extensive ice fields. These messages are noted, sometimes passed to the bridge, sometimes acknowledged, but perhaps without a full, urgent appreciation of the potential danger they signify, especially given the unusual density of the warnings. Ice is a known hazard in the North Atlantic in spring, something experienced mariners are accustomed to navigating around. On this state-of-the-art vessel, sailing through exceptionally calm seas under clear skies, the warnings don't seem to disrupt the prevailing atmosphere of serene confidence. The sheer volume of passenger traffic for the wireless operators also means that sometimes navigational warnings might be delayed or not given top priority. Captain Smith himself maintains a reassuring presence. He might dine occasionally at passengers' tables, attend Sunday service, and be seen making his regular inspections, his familiar bearded figure a symbol of steadfast command. His long experience and calm demeanor inspire trust. The officers on the bridge, Murdoch, Lightoller, Pittman, Boxhall, Lowe, Moody, stand their watches with professional diligence, navigating by the stars and the compass, keeping a watchful eye on the ship's course and the surrounding ocean. Lookouts are posted high above in the crow's nest, scanning the horizon, their eyes straining against the cold, clear darkness, though perhaps hampered on this voyage by the unusual and, later controversial, lack of binoculars provided for them. So the days pass, one blending into the next. Friday gives way to Saturday, Saturday to Sunday, April 14th. The sea remains remarkably calm, described by some passengers as being like polished glass or a mill pond. The sky is clear, the air cold, but bracing. Sunday proceeds much like the previous days. Church services are held in the morning, meals are enjoyed, passengers relax and socialize. There is no hint of impending doom, no premonition of the tragedy that lies just hours ahead. The atmosphere remains one of peaceful routine, secure passage, and quiet enjoyment of the unparalleled comfort offered by the great ship. Picture the Titanic that Sunday afternoon and evening, sailing smoothly westward under a vast, starlit sky. The ocean is exceptionally calm, flat, dark. The air temperature drops significantly as the ship enters a region known for ice, the cold becoming biting on the exposed decks. More wireless warnings about icebergs are received throughout the day and into the evening. Some noted, some perhaps delayed or even dismissed due to the pressure of sending passenger messages before the ship moved out of range of the Cape Race station. On the bridge, the officers are aware of the potential for ice, but perhaps the unusual calmness of the sea makes spotting bergs more difficult. There are no waves breaking against their base to give advance warning through sound or white water. The lookouts, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, peer into the darkness ahead, their eyes straining against the cold wind, wishing perhaps for the binoculars that might help them pierce the deceptive calm. Below decks, the passengers are largely oblivious to the dropping temperature and the accumulating ice warnings. Dinner is served perhaps even more splendidly than usual on a Sunday. Music plays, conversations flow. In the smoking room, men enjoy their cigars. In the lounges, people relax. Later, many retire to their cabins, lulled to sleep by the gentle motion of the ship and the steady thrum of the engines. The great liner sails on through the cold, dark, silent night, an island of light and warmth in the vast, indifferent ocean. The calm is deep, pervasive, serene, a profound peace settling over the ship and her sleeping passengers, unaware that this tranquility is poised on the very edge of eternity. Let the image of the great ship sailing peacefully under the vast starlit sky linger. Feel the deep calm of the ocean, the cold night air. Now draw your focus gently towards the subtle signs, the quiet whispers of warning that permeated the cold air and the invisible radio waves around the Titanic as that fateful Sunday evening, April 14th, deepened into night. These were not loud alarms but soft accumulating details, easily missed or misinterpreted amidst the prevailing sense of security, like quiet footnotes in the grand narrative of the voyage. Imagine the bridge of the Titanic high above the water, enclosed yet offering panoramic views through its large windows. It was the nerve center of the ship, a place of quiet professionalism and routine. As night fell and the temperature continued to drop sharply, falling towards freezing point, the officers on watch were acutely aware they were entering a region where ice could be expected. This was a known seasonal hazard in the north, Atlantic shipping lanes. Second Officer Charles Lytler held the watch from 6 p.m. until 10 p.m. He was an experienced seaman, known for his diligence and perhaps a certain cautiousness. During his watch, the temperature fell steadily. He would have ensured the lookouts were reminded to keep an especially sharp watch for ice, particularly small ice and growlers, which could be harder to spot on such an unusually calm sea. The absence of waves meant no telltale white water, breaking at the base of an iceberg, removing a crucial auditory and visual clue. Visual detection, relying solely on the contrast between a dark object and the slightly less dark sea and sky, became paramount. Lightoller later recalled discussing the cold, clear weather with Captain Smith, noting how favorable it was for spotting ice far off, yet also remarking on the deceptive nature of the calm sea. Before going off duty, Lightoller made sure the lookouts understood the conditions and the need for vigilance. At 10 p.m., the watch changed. First Officer William Murdoch took command of the bridge. Murdoch was also highly experienced, respected for his skill, and considered one of the company's finest officers, known for his calm head in difficult situations. He received the handover from Lightoller, including the ship's position, course, speed, still maintaining around 22 knots near her maximum, and the standing orders regarding the ice warnings and the need for sharp lookout. The bridge settled into the quiet routine of the middle watch. Sixth Officer James Moody and Fourth Officer Joseph Boxhall were also on duty, assisting Murdoch. Imagine the dimly lit space, the soft glow from the binnacle illuminating the compass card, the quiet ticking of the chronometers, the occasional soft click of the engine order telegraph transmitting adjustments to the engine room far below. Officers moved quietly, checking the course, monitoring the ship's progress on the chart, occasionally stepping out onto the open bridge wings to scan the horizon themselves, feeling the biting cold of the night air. Think of the lookouts again, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, stationed in the crow's nest high on the foremast. Picture their small exposed perch, the wind whistling past, the cold biting through their thick coats, numbing fingers and faces. They scanned the darkness. Ahead, sector by sector, their eyes straining to pierce the haze-free but moonless night. The stars were brilliant, offering some ambient light, but the sea itself was a black, glassy expanse reflecting the stars like scattered diamonds, making it difficult to distinguish a dark shape against the water. They knew the importance of their task, especially in these latitudes at this time of year. Their shift had begun at 10:00 p.m. and was due to end at midnight, yet they worked without the aid of binoculars. These instruments, standard equipment for lookouts, were inexplicably unavailable to them on this voyage, stored away in a locker for which the key was held by an officer, David Blair, who had been transferred off the ship just before sailing from Southampton, apparently forgetting to hand over the key in the reshuffle. This lack of equipment, a seemingly small detail, a minor oversight in the complex logistics of departure, would later become a point of intense scrutiny and regret. Could binoculars have made a difference? Could they have spotted the danger just minutes, perhaps even seconds, sooner? We can only wonder, letting the thought drift gently by like a passing cloud. Meanwhile, down in the Marconi wireless room, located just behind the bridge, the ether continued to crackle with messages. Throughout the day, Sunday, April 14th, several ships had reported ice in the vicinity, their warnings painting a picture of an unusually icy sea ahead. The Caronia reported icebergs early in the day. The Dutch liner Noordam also reported much ice. The White Star liner Baltic, captained by a previous commander of Titanic, relayed a message from the Greek steamer Athenae reporting passing icebergs and large quantities of field ice. This message was acknowledged by Captain Smith and reportedly shown to Bruce Ismay, the White Star Line chairman traveling aboard, though its full significance might not have registered amidst the confidence in Titanic's capabilities. Later, the German liner America reported passing 2 large icebergs, but this message, addressed to the hydrographic office in Washington, was treated as non-urgent by the Titanic's wireless operators and may not have even reached the bridge. Danyam, wireless operators, senior operator Jack Phillips and junior operator Harold Bride, were employed by the Marconi Company, not directly by White Star Line. Their primary duty was handling passenger telegrams, a lucrative business. Navigational messages were secondary and handled according to varying protocols. On this Sunday, they were particularly busy clearing a backlog of passenger messages before the ship moved further west, out of range of the powerful Cape Ray station in Newfoundland. Imagine the small room, filled with the hum of equipment, the sharp crackle of the spark gap transmitter, Phillips, perhaps looking tired after long hours, meticulously tapping out Morse code, Bride assisting or taking a rest break. As the evening progressed, more warnings arrived. Around 7:30 p.m., the steamer Californian traveling nearby radioed that she had encountered 3 large icebergs. This message was intercepted by Phillips and reportedly delivered to the bridge. Later, around 9:40 p.m., the steamer Masaba sent a general warning to all ships in the area, reporting much heavy pack ice and a great number large icebergs, also field ice, providing specific coordinates that placed this danger directly in Titanic's path. This crucial message was received by Phillips, but preoccupied with the Cape Race traffic, he seems to have acknowledged it but set it aside, failing to ensure its immediate delivery to the bridge. It was a message that pinpointed the exact nature and location of the hazard Titanic was steaming towards at high speed. Perhaps the most poignant warning came around 10:55 p.m. The Californian, the same ship that had reported ice earlier, had now stopped for the night, finding herself surrounded by ice. Her sole wireless operator, Cyril Evans, called up the Titanic, which was clearly visible nearby. Evans began to send, "I say, old man, we are stopped and surrounded by ice." Before he could relay the position, an overwhelmed and perhaps irritable Jack Phillips reportedly cut him off sharply with the message, Shut up, I am busy, I am working Cape Race." Evans, whose own equipment was less powerful and perhaps interfering with Phillips's reception from the distant shore station, listened for a while longer, heard Phillips continuing to exchange routine traffic with Cape Race, and then, around 11:30 p.m., switched off his set and went to bed. The final, direct warning from a nearby ship, blocked by ice, was silenced. Imagine the quiet irony, the missed connection across the dark, cold water, two ships within sight, yet failing to communicate the vital information that might have averted disaster. On the bridge of the Titanic, First Officer Murdoch continued his watch. He knew about the earlier ice reports, the ones that had reached him. He was aware of the sharp drop in temperature, another indicator of nearby ice. Standard procedure in such conditions might involve maintaining speed but exercising extreme vigilance, relying on lookouts and bridge officers to spot danger in time to maneuver the massive ship. Slowing down was not typically done unless ice was actually sighted or visibility was poor. The pressure to maintain schedule on a maiden voyage might also have been a subtle, unspoken factor. Murdoch, Moody, and Boxhall scanned the horizon, peering into the darkness. The air was exceptionally clear, the stars sharp, but the sea remained unnaturally flat and black, offering no clues. Captain Smith had retired for the night around 9:20 p.m. after joining a dinner party in the a la carte restaurant and spending some time on the bridge discussing the conditions with Lightoller. Before leaving, he gave his usual night orders, instructing the officers to maintain course and speed but to notify him immediately if conditions became hazy or if they encountered anything unusual. He slept soundly, trusting in his experienced officers and the integrity of his magnificent ship. So the great ship sailed onward, at over 25 miles per hour, through the freezing, calm, dark night. The warnings had been numerous, more numerous than usual perhaps, painting a clear picture of danger ahead for anyone collating them. Yet due to a combination of factors, the focus on passenger wireless traffic, the lack of rigid protocols for handling warnings, the inherent confidence in the ship's size and technology, the exceptionally deceptive conditions of a calm, sea and moonless night, and perhaps simple human oversight, the cumulative weight of these quiet whispers failed to trigger an urgent alarm. The Titanic continued her serene, seemingly invulnerable passage, rushing silently towards her appointment with destiny. Hidden somewhere in the immense, cold darkness ahead, stay with that feeling of deep calm. The great ship gliding through the cold, starlit night, the passengers mostly asleep, the officers watchful on the bridge, the lookouts straining their eyes in the crow's nest. Hold on to that image of profound peace, because even the moment that changed everything arrived not with a crash or a bang for most, but as a subtle interruption, a gentle shudder, a quiet anomaly in the ship's steady rhythm. It is approximately 11:40 p.m. on Sunday, April 14, 1912 ship's time. The air temperature is just below freezing. The sea is exceptionally unnaturally calm and flat, like polished obsidian reflecting the countless stars above. There is no moon. Titanic steams westward at about 22 knots. High in the crow's nest, Frederick Fleet suddenly sees something ahead. A shape, darker than the dark sea, looming directly in their path. It appears small at first but grows rapidly in size. It is an iceberg. He immediately strikes the lookout bell 3 times, the standard signal for an object dead ahead, and simultaneously lifts the telephone connecting the crow's nest directly to the bridge. On the bridge, 6th Officer Moody answers the call. "What did you see?" he asks calmly. Fleet's urgent voice comes back. "Iceberg, right ahead." Moody acknowledges with a calm, "Thank you," and immediately relays the warning to First Officer Murdoch, who is in command. Murdoch reacts instantly. Even before Moody relays the message, Murdoch has likely seen the berg himself or sensed the urgency. He instinctively orders hard a starboard. This command, in the steering conventions of the time, would turn the ship's bow to port, left. Almost simultaneously, he rings the engine order telegraph to stop engines, and then quickly follows with full astern on both reciprocating engines. His intention is clear: to turn the ship away from the obstacle while simultaneously trying to reduce speed. It's a complex maneuver for such a large vessel traveling at speed, requiring the ship to pivot while slowing down. Imagine the sequence unfolding in near silence, broken only by the clang of the lookout bell, the calm voices on the telephone and bridge, and the ringing of the engine order telegraphs. Down in the engine room, engineers react swiftly to the telegraph commands, shutting off steam to the main engines and engaging the reversing mechanisms for the massive reciprocating engines. The low-pressure turbine driving the center propeller cannot be reversed quickly and likely just stops receiving steam, its propeller windmilling uselessly or even creating drag. The great ship begins to respond to the helm, her bow slowly swinging to port. But her momentum is immense. She is nearly 900 feet long, weighs over 46,000 tons, and is traveling at over 30 feet per second. Turning takes time and distance. The iceberg looms closer, a mountain of ancient ice, calved perhaps from a Greenland glacier months or years before, drifting silently south into the shipping lanes. For perhaps 37 seconds, an eternity on the bridge, a fleeting moment elsewhere, the ship turns. It seems agonizingly slow. The iceberg slides along the starboard, right side of the ship. It doesn't strike the bow head-on, as Murdoch's swift action has prevented that direct catastrophic impact. Instead, the underwater spur of the iceberg, hidden below the calm surface, makes contact with the ship's hull plates along the starboard side, beginning near the bow. For most passengers, especially those already asleep in their cabins, the contact is surprisingly gentle. Many feel nothing at all. Others describe it as a slight shudder, a faint jarring sensation, a vibration that momentarily interrupts the smooth rhythm of the engines they've grown accustomed to. Some compare it to the ship rolling over 1,000 marbles, or a faint grinding noise. A few passengers awake in first-class suites located further forward and lower down might feel it more distinctly, perhaps hearing a scraping sound or feeling a more pronounced bump. Some might glance out their portholes but see only the dark sea. On the upper decks, passengers still awake, perhaps finishing a card game in the first-class smoking room, having a late-night chat in the second-class library, or simply awake, in their cabins, might notice the engines stopping. The sudden absence of the constant low-thrumming vibration is perhaps more noticeable than the impact itself. Some might wonder why the ship has stopped in the middle of the ocean. Curiosity rather than alarm is the initial reaction for many. Lawrence Beasley, a second-class passenger awake and reading in his cabin, described it as a feeling as though the ship had passed over some submerged obstacle. There was no violent concussion, but just a distinct hesitation and jar, and he noted the engine stopped almost immediately afterwards. In the first-class smoking room, still occupied by a few gentlemen finishing their drinks and conversation, some noticed the slight tremor. Spencer Silverthorne reportedly saw an iceberg pass by the window, remarking on its proximity. But there was no panic, perhaps just comments on the unusual event before conversation resumed. Down in the boiler rooms and engine rooms, the experience was different. The engineers felt the impact more directly. Stokers might have been thrown off balance by the shudder. The sudden telegraph order for full astern would have caused immense activity as engineers wrestled with valves and levers to reverse the giant engines, sending vibrations through the ship. Some crew members working in the forward lower decks near the point of contact would have felt and heard the grinding impact much more severely, perhaps seeing water begin to enter almost immediately. On the bridge, Murdoch watches the iceberg glide past. Having ordered the engines full astern, he now likely orders them stopped again once the immediate danger is past, perhaps to assess the situation. He also orders the watertight doors closed, activating a switch on the bridge that electrically releases the heavy steel doors located deep within the ship, sealing the vertical compartments from each other. This is a standard safety procedure after any collision or grounding. Far below, warning bells ring near the doors before they slide shut, hopefully giving crew members time to get clear. Captain Smith, awakened by the cessation of the engines, vibration or perhaps the slight jar, quickly arrives on the bridge demanding to know what happened. Murdoch reports hitting an iceberg. Smith, Murdoch, and other officers likely peer over the side, trying to assess the damage in the darkness. They see the iceberg receding into the distance astern, a large dark mass against the starlit sea. There is no immediate obvious sign of catastrophic damage from their high vantage point, but below the waterline, the damage is severe, though insidious. The iceberg hasn't ripped a single long gash as once thought. Instead, the pressure and scraping of the underwater ice spur likely buckled the steel hull plates along the starboard side, popping rivets and opening up a series of thin gaps and breaches along seams below the waterline, stretching intermittently for perhaps 250 to 300 feet. These breaches occur across the first 6 of the ship's 16 watertight compartments: the forepeak tank, number 1 hold, number 2 hold, number 3 hold, where mail and baggage were stored, boiler room number 6, and boiler room number 5. Water begins to pour into these forward compartments immediately. Seawater, icy cold, rushes into the dark spaces, swirling around cargo, mail bags, and eventually reaching the forward boiler rooms, where stokers might still be working or resting. The ship's design allowed her to stay afloat with any 2 main compartments flooded, or even the first 4 compartments breached. But damage extending across 6 compartments is fatal. It overcomes the safety margin built into the design. The bow begins to settle, very slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, as thousands of tons of seawater pour in. Captain Smith quickly orders 4th Officer Boxhall to go below and inspect the forward part of the ship for damage. Boxhall makes his way down, perhaps finding some minor damage or flooding in crew areas, but initially reporting nothing too serious. However, reports soon begin to filter up from below. Mail clerks finding water rising rapidly in the mail sorting room in number 3 hold. Engineers reporting water entering boiler room number 6. Captain Smith also summons Thomas Andrews, the ship's chief designer from Harland & Wolff, who is traveling aboard as part of the Guarantee Group, overseeing the ship's performance. Andrews, along with Smith, undertakes a rapid inspection of the affected areas, or receives reports from below. They quickly grasp the terrible reality. The damage is too extensive. Water is pouring into the first 6 compartments. As the bow sinks lower, the water will eventually spill over the top of the watertight bulkhead behind the 6th flooded compartment at E deck level, and flood the 7th, then the 8th, and so on. It's like an ice cube tray being tilted. Once water fills the first few sections, it spills over into the next. Andrews, with his intimate knowledge of the ship's design, reportedly gives Captain Smith the grim prognosis: the ship is doomed, and she has perhaps only an hour or 2 left to float. This devastating assessment occurs relatively quickly among the senior officers and the designer, perhaps within 15 to 20 minutes of the collision. Yet on the passenger decks above, an atmosphere of calm, even nonchalance, still prevails. The ship seems solid, stable. The lights are all on. There is no list. The engines are stopped, but perhaps it's just a temporary precaution. Some passengers, feeling curious, put on coats over their nightclothes and venture out into the corridors or onto the decks to see what has happened. They might see small pieces of ice scattered on the forward well deck, knocked off the iceberg as it passed. Some playfully pick them up, unaware of the mortal wound inflicted on the ship deep below. The collision itself was gentle, subtle, almost apologetic. The ship's response was immediate, but ultimately futile against the unyielding ice. The realization of the true extent of the damage was swift among those who knew, but slow to dawn on the vast majority of those aboard, still wrapped in the quiet confidence of the great ship, unaware that the quiet warnings of the evening had culminated in this gentle, fatal touch in the dark, cold, silent sea. Let the image of the gentle collision fade. The slight shudder, the iceberg gliding silently away into the darkness. Hold on to the feeling of quiet confusion, the initial lack of alarm that followed the impact. We now enter the period of slow realization, the gradual dawning of the unthinkable truth and the hesitant beginnings of the evacuation. It unfolds not in a sudden wave of panic, but in pockets of awareness, quiet orders, and a growing sense of unease beneath the surface calm. In the minutes immediately following the collision, around 11:40 p.m., the vast majority of passengers remain unaware of the gravity of the situation. The ship is stopped, yes, but she rests calmly on the flat sea. The lights burn brightly. There is no list to speak of yet. Many who were awakened by the slight jar simply turn over and go back to sleep, assuming it was nothing serious. Others, driven by curiosity, dress warmly and venture out onto the decks or into the corridors. Imagine these early explorers. They might encounter stewards who offer reassurance, perhaps suggesting it was just a minor incident, maybe related to ice, and that everything is under control. Some passengers gather in small groups discussing theories. Was it an engine problem? Did we drop a propeller blade? Did we brush against some ice? The atmosphere is one of mild curiosity, perhaps a little excitement at the unscheduled stop, but certainly not fear. On the forward well deck, some passengers find pieces of ice, remnants scraped off the berg as it passed. They might pick them up, examine them, even playfully toss them around, unaware that these fragments are souvenirs from the instrument of the ship's mortal wounding deep below the waterline. It's a strange, almost surreal scene. People interacting casually with pieces of the very thing that has doomed them under the cold, indifferent stars. Meanwhile, on the bridge and in the depths of the ship, the reality is sinking in much faster for those in key positions. Captain Smith, having received Thomas Andrews' devastating assessment that the ship has perhaps only an hour or two left, understands the immediate need for action, however unbelievable the situation seems. The largest, newest, supposedly safest ship in the world is foundering beneath his feet. Around midnight, roughly 20 minutes after the collision, Captain Smith gives the order to uncover the lifeboats and muster the passengers and crew. This order marks the official, albeit quiet, beginning of the emergency. Stewards are instructed to rouse passengers, telling them to put on warm clothing and their life belts and assemble on the boat deck. The instruction is delivered calmly, often without explicitly stating the ship is sinking, perhaps to avoid causing panic. Precautionary measure might be the phrase used. Imagine the stewards moving through the quiet corridors, knocking gently on cabin doors. "Captain's orders, sir, madam. Please put on your life belts and come up to the boat deck." The response varies. Some passengers, trusting the ship implicitly, are slow to react, perhaps questioning the need, even complaining about being disturbed. Others, sensing an underlying urgency in the steward's tone or recalling the earlier shudder, dress quickly and obey. Families gather their children, bundling them in warm clothes over nightwear. There is confusion. Where is the boat deck? Should they bring luggage? What is actually happening? In first class, the process is perhaps more orderly, with stewards assisting passengers directly. Valets and maids help their employers. Yet even here there is reluctance and disbelief. Some prominent passengers initially refuse to leave their comfortable cabins for the cold deck, convinced it's an unnecessary drill. In second class, similar scenes unfold. Passengers help each other with life belts, gather in corridors, and begin making their way upwards, perhaps with more questions than answers. In third class, the situation is more challenging. Located on the lower decks, further from the boat deck, and often unfamiliar with the ship's layout, which was intentionally segregated, steerage passengers face greater difficulty. Language barriers add to the confusion for non-English speakers. While stewards are assigned to third-class areas, the task of rousing and guiding hundreds of people through the complex maze of corridors and stairways towards the upper decks is immense. Some accounts suggest that access routes from third class to the boat deck were initially kept closed or were difficult to navigate, leading to delays and confusion, though the extent and intent behind this remain debated. Imagine the growing anxiety in these lower decks as passengers sense something is wrong, but struggle to get clear instructions or find their way. Simultaneously, Captain Smith orders the wireless operators to begin sending out distress calls. Around 12:15 a.m., Jack Phillips begins transmitting the standard distress signal, CQD, often interpreted as "Come Quick, Danger," followed by Titanic's call sign, MGY, and her estimated position. He alternates this with the newer SOS signal, chosen because the 3 dots, 3 dashes, 3 dots were easy to distinguish. Imagine the desperate urgency now in the small Marconi room, the sharp crackle of the transmitter sending out its invisible plea for help into the vast empty night, hoping another ship is close enough, listening and able to respond. On the boat deck itself, activity begins under the bright deck lights, which contrast sharply with the darkness of the surrounding ocean. Crew members, under the direction of the officers, Chief Officer Wild, First Officer Murdoch, Second Officer Littler, and others taking charge of different sections, start removing the canvas covers from the 20 lifeboats. 16 large wooden boats in davits along the sides, and 4 smaller collapsible canvas boats stored on the deck. The davits, designed by the Whalen Davit Company, are new and efficient, capable of launching multiple boats from each station. Though, the crew has had limited practice with them. The process is initially slow and hampered by uncertainty. The sheer scale of the ship makes the lifeboats look small and inadequate, even though Titanic actually carried more lifeboat capacity than was legally required at the time. Regulations hadn't kept pace with ship size. There seems to be no immediate sense of extreme urgency among many of the crew or passengers gathering on deck. The ship still feels solid. The list to starboard is barely noticeable at first, and the band, assembled by Wallace Hartley, begins to play cheerful ragtime tunes in the first-class lounge, or perhaps initially on deck, a deliberate attempt to maintain calm and morale. Officers begin trying to persuade passengers to enter the lifeboats. This proves difficult in the early stages. Many passengers, particularly women, are reluctant to leave the perceived safety of the massive, brightly lit Titanic for a small boat being lowered down the dark side of the ship into the freezing blackness below. It seems safer aboard, might be the thought. The ship looks so secure, so permanent. Stories abound of passengers needing considerable coaxing to enter the first few boats. The order, women and children first, is given, a standard maritime tradition, but its interpretation varies slightly between the officers in charge on different sides of the ship. Officer Lightoller, overseeing the loading on the port side, interprets it strictly, women and children only. Officer Murdoch, on the starboard side, seems to interpret it as women and children first, allowing men to board if no more women or children are immediately at hand to fill the boat. This difference in interpretation would have significant consequences for who survived. Around 12:45 a.m., nearly an hour after the collision, the first lifeboat, number 7 on the starboard side under Murdoch's supervision, is lowered away. It is far from full, carrying perhaps only 28 people despite having a capacity for 65. Passengers nearby were hesitant to board, and the officers were perhaps unsure how much weight the new davits could safely lower, or simply keen to get the process started. Imagine that small boat, dangling precariously as it descends the towering side of the ship, finally reaching the glassy black water, its occupants feeling suddenly very small and vulnerable, looking back up at the immense, lit vessel they have just left. Other boats follow, often similarly underfilled in these early stages. Number 5, starboard, and number 6, port, carrying Margaret Molly Brown, are launched shortly after. Lightoller struggles to persuade women into number 6, eventually almost forcing them in. The process is slow, punctuated by the sound of the band playing, the quiet orders of the officers, the creak of the davits, and the murmur of confused passengers, milling about on the increasingly crowded boat deck. As the minutes tick by, the ship's bow continues its slow, almost imperceptible descent. The list to starboard becomes slightly more noticeable. The water level rises higher against the forward bulkheads. Down below, the engineers and stokers who remain work heroically to keep the lights and power running as long as possible, essential for the evacuation. Water pours into boiler room number 5 now, forcing the remaining firemen there to retreat. The sounds from below change, the steady hum replaced by the gurgle and rush of incoming water in the forward sections. On deck, the realization that the ship is truly sinking begins to spread more widely. The slight but increasing downward tilt of the deck becomes undeniable. The sense of urgency grows. Passengers who were initially reluctant now push forward, seeking places in the remaining boats. The band continues to play, shifting perhaps to hymns or more calming melodies. A soundtrack to the unfolding slow-motion tragedy. The slow realization, the quiet orders, the initial reluctance, the underfilled boats. It all paints a picture, not of immediate chaos, but of a gradual, almost dreamlike transition from serene confidence to dawning horror, played out under the cold, watchful stars on the calm, dark sea. Let the image of the first lifeboats pulling away from the immense, brightly lit ship fade gently. Feel the growing tilt of the deck beneath your feet, the cold night air, the sound of the band playing bravely on. As the evacuation continues and the ship sinks lower, the darkness is punctuated not just by the ship's lights but by countless individual human moments. Quiet acts of courage, poignant farewells, strange calmness amidst the unfolding tragedy. Let's gently focus on some of these stories, these soft echoes of humanity in the face of the inevitable. Imagine the boat deck, now more crowded, the initial reluctance to leave the ship replaced by a growing urgency, yet still largely without overt panic for much of the time. The ship's list to starboard is becoming more pronounced, making movement slightly more difficult, requiring people to brace themselves against the slope. The bow is noticeably lower in the water, the sea seeming closer than before. Officers continue to direct the loading of the lifeboats, their voices remaining calm but firm, cutting through the low murmur of conversation and the distant sounds of the ship's distress. One enduring image is that of the ship's orchestra, led by Wallace, Hartley. Having played cheerful tunes earlier to maintain calm, they now reportedly switch to hymns or waltzes. Picture them standing together, perhaps near the entrance to the grand staircase on the boat deck, their usual spot, instruments in hand, violin, cello, bass, playing on as the deck tilts beneath them. Their faces might show concentration, perhaps a shared understanding, but their focus remains on the music. Their familiar presence and the steady melodies provide a strange, serene soundtrack to the increasingly desperate situation, a testament to duty, and perhaps an attempt to offer solace in the face of the unimaginable. The exact final piece they played is debated. Some accounts say it was the hymn Nearer, My God, to Thee. Others suggest it might have been the waltz Autumn. Whatever the melody, imagine the soft, brave notes drifting out into the cold night air, a small island of harmony in the growing chaos, a final, gentle offering before the silence fell. Consider the story of Isidore and Ida Strauss, the elderly co-owner of Macy's department store and his devoted wife. Ida was offered a place in a lifeboat, likely number 8, but she refused to leave her husband. Friends urged her to go, reminding her of her age and status, but she reportedly replied calmly, "We have lived together for many years. Where you go, I go." She is said to have given her warm fur coat to her maid, Ellen Bird, ensuring she got into the lifeboat. Witnesses saw Isidore and Ida last sitting quietly together on deck chairs near lifeboat number 8, facing their end with serene togetherness, a quiet testament to a lifetime of devotion. Let that image of quiet companionship, unwavering love in the face of death, rest gently in your mind. Think of Benjamin Guggenheim, the wealthy industrialist. Realizing the situation was dire and lifeboat places scarce, he and his valet, Victor Giglio, reportedly returned to their cabins and changed into their finest evening wear. Guggenheim was quoted as saying, "We've dressed up in our best and are prepared to go down like gentlemen." They were last seen calmly sipping brandy and smoking cigars in the first-class staircase area, facing the inevitable with a kind of stoic, albeit perhaps fatalistic, elegance. A quiet acceptance, an adherence to a certain code of conduct, even at the end. Amidst the controlled loading of boats, there were moments of quiet heroism and difficult choices. Second Officer Lightoller, strictly enforcing his women and children only rule on the port side, found himself having to refuse entry to men even when boats were being lowered partially empty. Imagine the quiet tension of those moments, the adherence to duty under immense pressure, the silent pleas in men's eyes being met with a firm but perhaps regretful refusal, the cold night air amplifying the starkness of the decision. On the starboard side, First Officer Murdoch's slightly more lenient interpretation allowed some men into boats when women weren't immediately present. This led to difficult decisions, quick judgments made in the semi-darkness and confusion. There were also moments of selfless sacrifice. Men stepped back from the davits to allow women and children to board. Husbands saw their wives and children, safely into boats knowing they themselves would likely remain behind. Picture those quiet farewells at the railings. A final embrace, a whispered word, "Be brave." A brave smile masking heartbreak, gestures of love transcending the surrounding disaster. The cold metal of the railing, the vast darkness beyond, the small bobbing boat below, a scene etched in memory. Consider the engineers, electricians, stokers, and trimmers still working deep within the ship. Many remained at their posts long after they could have tried to save themselves. Their dedication kept the lights burning, the pumps running, though ultimately overwhelmed, and the wireless transmitting until the very last moments. Chief Engineer Joseph Bell and his team worked tirelessly in the engine and boiler rooms, surrounded by rising water and failing systems. Their actions allowed the evacuation, such as it was, to proceed in light rather than total darkness, a final, vital contribution, made far from the view of those on deck. Imagine their quiet focus amidst the noise of failing machinery and rising water, perhaps exchanging brief, knowing glances, united by a commitment to duty until the end. Think also of the stewards and stewardesses, moving through the ship, helping, passengers with life belts guiding them towards the decks, offering words of reassurance often at the expense of their own safety. Many continued their duties calmly, assisting women and children into boats, ensuring blankets were provided, upholding their service roles even as the ship foundered beneath them. Stewardess Violet Jessup, who survived both the Titanic and later, the sinking of her sister ship Britannic, recalled the quiet efficiency and bravery of many of her colleagues. Even among the passengers, there were countless small acts of kindness and composure. People helped each other with the unfamiliar fastenings of life belts. Strangers offered words of comfort or shared a warm scarf. Experienced travelers might have calmly explained procedures to those less familiar. In the lifeboats themselves, once lowered, occupants huddled together for warmth against the biting cold, sharing what little they had, peering back anxiously at the receding lights of the great ship. A dwindling island of light in the immense blackness. The silence between the scattered boats was profound, broken only by the sound of oars dipping into the water or the distant fading strains of the band. There were moments of confusion and near disaster during the lowering process. Boats sometimes caught on rivets or listed precariously due to uneven loading or the ship's increasing list. Quick actions by crew members, cutting ropes or guiding the descent, often averted catastrophe. Imagine the tense moments as a boat jammed, the quiet determination of the sailors working ropes in the darkness to free it and continue the descent towards the cold, black water. As the ship sank lower, the angle of the decks became steeper. Maintaining footing grew difficult. Sounds changed. The groaning of stressed metal became louder. The distant roar of water rushing into new compartments grew closer. Perhaps the crash of furniture or equipment breaking loose, deep within the ship echoed upwards. Yet reports consistently suggest that widespread panic was remarkably absent for much of the time. There was fear, certainly, and growing desperation as the number of remaining lifeboats dwindled, but also a strange sense of orderliness and resignation for many. The wireless operators, Phillips and Bride, continued sending distress signals even as water began to flood their cabin, the deck tilting beneath them. Captain Smith eventually came and quietly relieved them of their duty, telling them, "Men, you have done your full duty. You can do no more. Abandon your cabin. Now it's every man for himself." Phillips continued sending for a few moments longer, before they finally attempted to leave, grabbing spare life belts. Imagine their dedication, surrounded by the crackle of the wireless and the sound of rising water, maintaining that vital link until the last possible second. As the final lifeboats pulled away, those left on the increasingly tilted decks faced the end. Some gathered towards the stern, which was rising higher out of the water as the bow plunged deeper. Father Thomas Biles, a Catholic priest traveling second class, was seen leading prayers, offering absolution, and comforting those around him, his calm voice a point of focus for many. Others simply stood quietly, perhaps holding hands, watching the stars, awaiting the inevitable plunge. Some accounts mention Captain Smith being seen near the bridge, perhaps holding a child briefly before being washed away, though his final moments remain uncertain, shrouded in the quiet mystery of the sea. These individual stories, these fragments of human experience in the face of overwhelming disaster, paint a picture not just of tragedy, but of the resilience, dignity, and complexity of the human spirit. Acts of selfishness undoubtedly occurred, as did moments of panic, especially towards the very end as the ship began her final plunge. But what lingers in many accounts are the quiet moments, the shared hymn, the refused lifeboat seat, the final embrace, the dedication to duty, the calm acceptance of fate. These stories, whispered in the darkness of that night, became the enduring legacy of the people aboard the Titanic, softening the horror with glimpses of quiet grace. Let these gentle images of human moments, the band playing, the Strausses together, Guggenheim's resolve, the officer's duty, the engineer's sacrifice, the quiet farewells, settle in your mind. They are the soft counterpoint to the immense mechanical failure, the human heart beating quietly even as the great ship surrendered to the cold, dark, deep. Let the images of the final human moments on the tilting deck settle, the quiet prayers, the brave music, the last farewells. Feel the immense cold, the vast darkness, the profound silence of the North Atlantic night. We now gently follow the great ship on her final journey, not into horror but into memory, into the quiet echoes that linger in the deep and in our collective consciousness. The time is now around 2:10 a.m. on Monday, April 15th, 1912. The Titanic's bow has plunged deep beneath the surface and the stern section rises dramatically out of the water, towering against the starlit sky. The lights, kept burning heroically by the engineers until the very end, flicker and then go out, plunging the ship into darkness, save for the faint starlight reflecting off her massive form. The angle steepens rapidly. Those still clinging to the stern are faced with an almost vertical climb or an inevitable slide into the freezing water. There are sounds now. The groaning and tearing of metal under immense stress, the roar of water rushing into the hull, the crash of heavy machinery, breaking loose deep inside. But let these sounds be distant, muffled, softened by the narrative like hearing a storm from inside a safe room. The final moments of the ship herself are a descent into the abyss. Many accounts suggest the ship broke apart, likely near the surface or just below it, somewhere around the area of the third funnel, unable to withstand the colossal stresses of the stern rising so high while the bow was anchored by the weight of inrushing water. Imagine not a violent explosion but a structural yielding, a final, immense sigh as the great vessel succumbs to the forces acting upon her. The stern section, after perhaps pausing briefly, settles back slightly before beginning its own final, vertical plunge. By approximately 2:20 a.m., less than 3 hours after striking the iceberg, the last visible part of the RMS Titanic slips beneath the surface of the calm, black ocean. The water closes over her, leaving behind only the scattered lifeboats, the debris, and tragically, hundreds of souls struggling in the lethally cold water. The great ship, the floating palace, the symbol of an era's confidence, is gone, returned to the elements. In the immediate aftermath, the sounds across the water are harrowing. The cries for help from those in the water, a terrible chorus fading relatively quickly as the freezing temperature takes its toll. Let us acknowledge this, gently, respectfully, but not dwell on the horror. Our focus remains on the quiet aftermath, the waiting, the rescue, and the echoes. In the scattered lifeboats, the survivors huddle together, cold, shocked, and uncertain. They are surrounded by the immense darkness, the flat, icy sea, and the brilliant, indifferent stars. They strain their eyes, searching for signs of other boats, for any sign of rescue. Some boats are dangerously overcrowded, like Collapsible B, which floated off the deck upside down and provided precarious refuge for about 30 men, including Second Officer Lightoller, who managed its occupants through the night with calm authority, balancing carefully on the overturned hull. Other boats, launched earlier, remain underfilled, their occupants perhaps too stunned or too few to row effectively. Only one lifeboat, number 14 under the command of Fifth Officer Lowe, reportedly goes back towards the site of the sinking after transferring passengers, managing to pull a few survivors from the water, but finding most have already succumbed to the cold. Imagine the long, cold hours of waiting in those small boats, the gentle rocking on the calm sea, the shared blankets, the quiet weeping muffled by the vast silence, the murmured prayers, the anxious scanning of the horizon as dawn approaches. The cold is intense, penetrating layers of clothing, numbing bodies and spirits. Hope dwindles with each passing hour in the profound darkness, but help is coming. The distress calls sent out by Phillips and Bride were picked up by several ships. The closest was the Cunard liner RMS Carpathia, about 58 miles away. Upon receiving the SOS, Carpathia's captain, Arthur Rostron, a man of swift decision and deep piety, immediately turned his ship around and steamed at full speed through the dangerous ice field towards Titanic's last reported position, pushing his vessel faster than she had ever gone before. He ordered his crew to prepare meticulously. Blankets laid out, medical supplies readied, hot drinks prepared, extra lookouts posted, gangway doors opened, ladders and slings rigged. Around 4 a.m., as the first hints of dawn begin to streak, the eastern sky with pale gray and pink, lookouts on the Carpathia spot a green flare, a signal from one of the lifeboats. Soon after, the first boat, number 2, is sighted. Imagine the overwhelming relief, the surge of hope for those in the lifeboat as they see the approaching lights of the Carpathia, a dark shape growing larger against the lightening sky, smoke pluming from her funnel. Imagine the scene on the Carpathia's deck, sailors standing ready at the rails, lowering rope ladders and slings, stewards waiting with blankets and hot coffee, doctors preparing to treat the injured and hypothermic. Captain Rostron himself stood on the bridge, overseeing every detail of the rescue with quiet intensity. Over the next 4 hours, the Carpathia carefully navigates the calm but ice-strewn sea, locating and picking up all 13 lifeboats that survived the night, as well as the occupants of the swamped collapsible boats. The rescue is methodical, careful, carried out with remarkable efficiency and compassion. Survivors are helped aboard, often needing to be lifted in slings or carried wrapped in blankets, given warm drinks, their names recorded. The contrast between their ordeal in the open boats and the warmth and safety of the rescue ship is immense. Many are too numb or shocked to speak. In total, just over 700 people are saved, less than a third of those who had sailed on the Titanic. More than 1,500 souls were lost to the cold Atlantic. As the sun rises fully, revealing the vast empty ocean dotted with icebergs glistening like cold monuments in the morning light, the scale of the tragedy becomes clearer. The Carpathia, her decks crowded with shocked survivors, lingers near the site for a while, searching for any further signs of life but finding none. A brief service is held on deck for those lost. Captain Rostron then makes the difficult decision to turn away from the scene and head for New York, the original destination for many of the survivors, carrying the news of the disaster and her precious human cargo. The journey to New York is somber. Survivors try to comprehend what happened, mourn their losses, and care for each other with quiet empathy. The passengers of the Carpathia generously share clothing and offer comfort. The wireless room is overwhelmed, sending lists of survivors, and the first fragmented accounts of the disaster to an anxious world waiting for news. When the Carpathia finally arrives in New York on the evening of April 18th, docking in pouring rain, she is met by vast crowds, reporters, and grieving families. The full story of the Titanic finally reaching the public. The aftermath brings inquiries, investigations, and changes. The sinking of the supposedly unsinkable ship leads to major reforms in maritime safety. The first International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, SOLAS, is held in 1914, mandating sufficient lifeboats for all aboard, requiring 24-hour radio watches on passenger ships and establishing the International Ice Patrol to monitor iceberg hazards in the North Atlantic, a service that continues to this day, funded by maritime nations, ensuring such a tragedy is less likely to happen. Again, the quiet echoes of the Titanic led to louder calls for safety. The Titanic herself rests now in the deep, dark, cold silence of the abyssal plain, over 2 miles beneath the surface. Her wreck was finally discovered in 1985 by Dr. Robert Ballard and his team, confirming the ship had indeed broken in two. She lies there still, a haunting memorial, slowly being reclaimed by the ocean, visited occasionally by submersibles exploring her secrets, bringing back images of profound stillness and decay, yet also enduring grandeur. But the Titanic is more than just a shipwreck. She remains a powerful story, an echo in the deep, a story about ambition and hubris, about technology and nature, about class distinctions and shared humanity. A story filled with moments of incredible bravery and quiet dignity, alongside tragedy and loss. It reminds us of the fragility of even our grandest creations and the enduring strength of the human spirit in the face of adversity. It is a story that continues to fascinate, to teach, and perhaps, in its telling, to offer a strange kind of peace. And now, let the story gently fade. Let the images of the great ship, the passengers, the crew, the lifeboats, the rescue, dissolve like ripples on calm water. Feel the quiet peace of the deep ocean where she rests. Feel the gentle rhythm of your own breathing. Slow, calm, deep. The tale is told. The echoes linger softly. But now it is time for rest, time for quiet, time for sleep. Allow yourself to drift, carried on the gentle currents of slumber, into the peaceful depths of the night. Let the silence embrace you. Soft, warm, safe. If this quiet journey brought you calm and peace, please consider liking and subscribing to this channel. Your gentle support helps us share more soothing stories and timeless tales like this one. And until we meet again, good night, sleep deeply, sleep peacefully.